I'm Chair Balke. I'm calling this meeting
Recording in progress.
calling this meeting of TCC to order at 5:31 p.m. Could we have roll call, please?
Committee Member Bickford.
Here.
Committee Member Blackerby.
Here.
Committee Member Metzenberg.
I'm here.
Committee Member Rodriguez.
Here.
Vice Chair Seedswag.
Here.
Chair Balke.
Here.
Committee Member Smith is absent. We have a quorum.
All right. Ms. Grant, do we have any changes to the agenda tonight?
No changes to the agenda.
Okay. I guess we'll go to general public comment for all the folks here or online. We'll open the floor to public comment. Any member of the public can address the committee for up to 2 minutes on any subject within our jurisdiction that's not on the agenda. Do we have any speakers?
A quick note for any online attendees. Please raise your hand if you would like to participate or provide public comment. We have no speakers.
All right. Ms. Grant, do we have announcements? Or what are the announcements?
Yes, Chair Balke, and excited to have Chair Balke. This is his first meeting that he's running today, so that's very exciting. I have lots of announcements. Normally we only have a couple, but there's a lot happening. So I just wanted to make you aware of the various budget meetings. I did send a follow-up email to the TCC just for particular links of when the budget meetings are occurring. Big picture that all departments are having to take cuts, but there's definitely a few cuts to the pavement maintenance program. In our opinion, pretty significant, but if you are interested in getting involved in the budget process, the link that I sent is ways on how to get involved and when the next various meetings are. So that's that. And then next Tuesday, the draft State Street Master Plan is going to City Council. The Transportation Circulation Committee will have a chance to review it at some point. Right now, we're trying to target the next TCC meeting in June. But at the Tuesday meeting, I believe that they'll have some of the cross sections, and they had the draft chapters and everything posted online. So please take a look at that. And if you're interested as a resident weighing or providing any opinion on the plan, then it is Tuesday is the day to participate. Then we go into pretty much anything transportation related. We're busy every evening from now till the end of May. So we will have our Safe Streets for All webinar next Wednesday about the engineering approaches to the priority streets from the identified streets on the highway injury network. We also will be going before Youth Council on May 4th to talk about youth-related collisions and what they think is the best communication method to reach the youth. We did have for our consultant finalize some of our messaging. It hasn't gone public yet, but on some of the topic items, we do really want to hear from our high school age students for feedback on a few of the messaging. Then, yay, May is just around the corner. That kicks off the Cyclemania. So there's a couple events that I'll highlight too, but if you go to the Cyclemania page, there's a ton of events, and it's, if you haven't ever participated in Cyclemania, it's a lot of fun. Again, there's a month long of events all throughout the county. So I encourage you to take a look. Then on the 6th, we have the in-person meeting on the priority streets. I am going to be leading the Mayor's Ride on May 8th, and that's to look at some of the Santa Barbara infrastructure that's been installed recently and infrastructure that's coming online soon. So again, go to the Cyclemania page for details. But right before the Mayor's Ride, there's actually a ribbon cutting with the County of Santa Barbara on the portion of the Modoc Path. So so finally, they're just a couple weeks away of opening that up, where we'll have a connection from the Las Positas Modoc path all the way now to the Auburn path. And that would be all off-street. So beyond excited for that. So following the ribbon cutting, then we'll have the mayor's ride. And it's just really exciting just to see our regional infrastructure really coming together.
Where are you going to be?
It will be right at where the Auburn Trail lets out on Modoc. And I'm blanking on the cross street, but I can follow up with the committee on the exact. Encore, yes, that is it. And then on May 12th, our team is returning at the request of our city administrator on the active transportation grant cycle 8 applications. So back at the last cycle, we had applied for the Lower East Side pedestrian bicycle overcrossing connecting the east side to the waterfront, and then various safety improvements in the east side. So the safety improvements in the east side got funded from another grant, but we still have unfunded need of the pedestrian bike overcrossing. So it's a check-in back to council on whether we can submit a grant. And then we also have a question for matching funds. Again, our budget's not looking so great, but in order for us to be competitive with the grant, we need to have some sort of matching. And so we are recommending a 1% match, and they match on construction costs. So this is a big one to match monies on. The second application that we're interested, it's again the same one that we applied for in cycle 7, would be the Castillo undercrossing safety improvements for pedestrians and cyclists. And that's also, we're requesting a 1% match. So May 12th is a key meeting and check-in. We did have resolutions of support 2 years ago when we applied for the grant the last time. So hoping that support continues. May 13th is that Lower East Side safety enhancements. So because it did get funded, we are in design right now, and it was a check-in back with the community about that. If we do get the green light from council to apply for that grant application, then we'll discuss more about that at that particular webinar. And so the matching meeting to that would be on the 20th. There's another good Cyclemania event I wanted to highlight. It's a ride from BC Centro all the way to Old Town Coffee. So again, highlighting some of the infrastructure in the city, unincorporated county, and city of Goleta. So if you're at all interested, it will be a long ride, but a fun ride, led by Christine Bourgeois, who is a longtime or former employee with when it was the Santa Barbara Bicycle Coalition. So, and then again with the Castillo undercrossing, if we have the green light to apply for the grant application, it's just another check-in with the community to go over that. We are proposing one change in style of infrastructure between from the Castillo Montecito intersection down to the Cabrillo is to raise bike lanes on both sides. I think before we had a multi-use path just on one side. So that would be the only change. So that would be the check-in with the community on those particular meetings. So those are the announcements. I will, of course, follow up with the committee just to remind everybody of these very important dates. It's from the Castillo Montecito intersection south, would be getting the cyclists out of the roadway and up on a raised bike lane.
And what is the application deadline for all the ATP stuff?
June 22nd. So it doesn't give us a lot of time to
Gotcha.
to write them, but so in between all of these meetings, there might be some weekends for our staff ahead of us through June 22nd, and then hopefully some days off after that.
Gotcha. All right. Definitely encourage committee member participation in all those events if you're interested. Does anyone else have any questions about any of the announcements?
Do we have a copy of all that announcement?
Oh, I will follow up with the email to the, yes, yes. You do have it is in your packet, but I think the font might be too small, so I will follow up.
Thank you.
Sounds good. All right. We'll move to our consent items. We'll do the approval of the minutes from the last meeting. Do we have a motion to approve the minutes?
So moved.
All right. Motion from committee member Blackerby. Do we have a second?
Second.
All right. Second from committee member Metzenberg. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All those.
Aye.
All right. All those opposed say nay. Any abstentions? Motion carries. All right, we'll move on to administrative items. The first up is a review of options for the waterfront adaptation plan. Ms. Grant, could you please introduce this item and
Yes.
the team here?
It's really exciting to have others from our department. So tonight joining us is Timmy Bolton and Melissa Hetrick. They're from the Sustainability and Resilience Department, longtime colleagues. I'm very excited for them to go over the waterfront adaptation planning effort with you all. They are doing a big roadshow with a lot of different city committees and boards, and so we are one of those stops. What I asked tonight is Mr. Bolton will be going over a lot of things that a lot of kind of beyond the transportation realm that you need to sort of understand before you weigh in on transportation related items, but also to focus comments on transportation related circulation as well. But feel free to, if you have a clarifying question of anything that Mr. Bolton goes over tonight, yes, feel free to also ask about that. So with that, I'll hand it off to Mr. Bolton to present.
Thank you, Ms. Grant. Honorable Chair and members of the TCC, thank you for the opportunity to present on the Waterfront Adaptation Plan. Ms. Grant did a great job of framing where we are in this process and what we'll cover today. We are unique as a city in that we have a dedicated adaptation and resilience program with 3 full-time staff whose purpose is to work collaboratively with teams throughout the organization to prepare our community for current and future climate-related hazards like sea level rise, flooding, erosion, and wildfire. We're actively working on several major work efforts as shown here. These are all primarily high-priority implementation from the city's 2021 Sea Level Rise Adaptation Plan. They include doing a regional coastal adaptation monitoring program with our partners at Beacon. It includes improving our wastewater and water systems for all climate-related hazards. It's this project that I'll cover today. It's improving flood resiliency in the Laguna watershed, and we're also working on a climate adaptation plan at the airport with our partners out there. So the purpose of this presentation today is really to focus on our waterfront adaptation plan, which is funded by the Coastal Commission, the Coastal Conservancy, as well as the city. My presentation today will begin with a brief overview of current and future coastal hazards, then run through the toolbox of potential solutions to address those hazards, some initial ideas we have on how to improve the experience for our users, and then really focus the bulk of the presentation on a suite of options that we're considering carrying forward through the process and may eventually be included in an ultimate draft plan. So our guiding light and vision for this work effort is shown here, which is to develop practical solutions to address coastal flooding and coastal erosion for at least the next 30 years while enhancing beach access, recreation, boating, and habitat. This is about a 3-year work effort. We're pretty close to the middle here. We did some initial community engagement last year, did a big effort to do new technical modeling and analysis to better understand what's at risk today and what will be at risk in the future. And we now find ourselves at the exciting juncture where we're starting to talk about solutions to address those risks and beginning to sketch out some preliminary ideas. I really want to emphasize that the ideas shown today are really the beginning of about a year-long process to build towards the ultimate recommended approaches and solutions. The next phase of this work effort will do a technical analysis to better understand the effectiveness of these solutions, when's the right time, how much are they going to cost, all of those types of things. So really, we're just a point of starting the conversation. Our project area is the 3-mile low-lying coastal area of our city that spans from Ledbetter Beach to the Clark Estate. It is one of the city's most valued public assets, supporting beaches, parks, the working harbor, fishing, tourism, recreation, and certainly extensive transportation infrastructure. It's the cornerstone of our local economy with upwards of $100 million in recreational value, plays a big part in the county's $7.7 billion blue economy, as well as the $2.2 billion South Coast tourism market. Because of its elevation and location, it's a portion of our city that's particularly vulnerable to coastal storms, flooding, and erosion. For the purposes of this project, we're primarily focused on two broad categories of impacts, which is the area where waves are actively crashing and causing damage, and then inland flooding coming from the ocean. Flooding from the rain and inland flooding from fluvial events is being handled in separate work efforts. Today, we experience both categories of those impacts. As shown on this slide, we've experienced big waves bashing against our shoreline. We've experienced impacts to our coastal access parking lots. That middle left graphic shows the Harbor West parking lot, which was undermined and partially collapsed during a big storm. We've separately experienced impacts to our other coastal access parking lots in the Ledbetter and also Harbor West area being flooded and covered in sand. And separately, we've experienced flooding in the Harbor commercial area, which has impacted parking and access and transportation function in and around that area. At the end of the day, it's truly not sustainable for us as a city to spend $3 million in cleanup and repair costs from a single large coastal storm, like we did in 2023, which is one of the principal reasons why we're doing this work effort. One of the things that we did as part of this project was to take a deep dive and see how our shoreline has evolved and changed over time. And what we found matched our anecdotal experience, which is that East Beach has been eroding significantly in recent time. Relative to the year 2000, certain reaches of it have eroded about 5 feet a year since that time period, which is a significant amount. This is important because it means not only are we losing recreational access to this beach, but that as the shoreline has migrated inland, so too has the risk of flooding to the areas around it. So what I mean by that is if you look at this graphic in the middle that was taken from a King Tide event this past November, the portion on the right aspect of this slide, namely the bikeway and Cabrillo Boulevard, is far more vulnerable to coastal flooding today than certainly it was in the year 2000. Thankfully, there are different dynamics along our coast, and Ledbetter was relatively stable, and West Beach actually grew slightly during the same analysis period. When we look forward in time, we see that our risk profile will evolve, and with continued sea level rise, our challenges will only grow. As a quick data point, since the year 2000, we've experienced 3 to 4 inches of local sea level rise. And we anticipate that that value and rate of increase will only grow in the coming years, creating a bigger challenge on our hands. With this and the following slide show our future shoreline position with all historic erosion patterns continuing, as well as the same infrastructure in place and same management decisions, so dredging in the harbor continues. What's new here is the addition of sea level rise on top of those historic processes. So the green line represents 0.8 foot of sea level rise, or about the year 2050. The red line, 1.6, the year 2065, and then the blue, 2.5 feet of sea level rise, or about the year 2075. And what we see based on this then is that within the next 50 years or so, without any action, we've more or less lost the sandy beach along a good portion of Ledbetter, certainly in front of the harbor commercial area, and then it fares a bit better in front of the picnic area at Ledbetter Beach Park. At West Beach, we see a different paradigm. Here we see a wide sandy beach, and including well beyond the 30-year focus of this work effort, it remains wide and sandy, which we see then really creates this profound opportunity to really focus this place as a sandy beach destination and a place for other activities and uses that may need to be relocated, which is important when we then look at East Beach and the challenges faced there. As I mentioned, we have this historic erosion challenge, and that challenge grows when you add in continued sea level rise on top of that. Based on our analysis, by about the year 2065, we could lose essentially most of the sandy beach along this portion of our shoreline. And at some point between 2065 and 2075, this entire area could erode all the way up to Cabrillo Boulevard, which creates quite the challenge. Taking a moment now to really dive in on the flood risk side of things, these maps again, so-called do-nothing scenario, all the infrastructure remains and the existing management conditions remain. The dark teal here shows the current high tide position. The light teal in the middle and the right graphic show future high tide with continued sea level rise. And then these additional colors represent different storm conditions, coastal storm conditions. And so what we see is that even today, there's inland flooding risk from really big coastal storms to Cabrillo Boulevard and some of our inland infrastructure. Over time, with continued sea level rise, this risk only grows. The point here is to really emphasize that we need some sort of vertical protective measure, something raised above grade to prevent water from the ocean from flooding our inland neighborhoods and our lower downtowns. So while we certainly have a challenge on our hands, I do want to emphasize that it's not all doom and gloom, and there is a toolbox of proven solutions. And we are looking at that entire toolbox, everything from traditional engineered hard solutions like seawalls and revetments to softer solutions like beach nourishment, sand berms, and dunes. Each one of the things shown on this slide come with distinct benefits and trade-offs, so it's likely that the eventual recommended approach will include components from each of these broad buckets of solutions shown on this slide. What I mean about those trade-offs is, for instance, seawalls and revetments can do a great job of protecting what's directly behind them, but they can also narrow the beach in front of them. Groins can do a great job of trapping sand and widening beaches, but they can also create downcoast impacts and create political liabilities. Our funding partners certainly favor relocating assets, but some things can't be easily moved, like our harbor. I know I've talked a lot about coastal hazards, but I really want to emphasize that we are taking a holistic lens when it comes to infrastructure improvements. If we're going to make this massive investment in our waterfront, why not do it in a way that also improves the experience for our users? So as part of our initial community engagement campaign, we said, hey, what can we do better? What would improve your experience along the waterfront? And so that's embodied in the ideas you see shown here. A key one, and that will be interest to this commission, is we heard clear desire that there needs to be a safe way to walk and bike throughout the entire project area. We have a very notable gap in the network in the Harbor West and Ledbetter parking lot area, so we plan to close that gap and address that safety concern through this work effort. We see this clear opportunity to really reimagine West Beach. Right now it's challenged by how the storm drain system works, in that it rains, it dumps out, it pools here, you create this sort of ponding, which compacts the sand and makes a less than ideal experience, so we plan to address that. There's certainly epic moments in places along the waterfront, but there are also places that aren't necessarily as connected or as welcoming as they could be. So that's a theme you'll see embedded in some of these ideas that we present later. We've heard clear demand for additional facilities, everything from boat storage to bathrooms. See a clear need to enhance economic vitality along the waterfront, both to support our local economy, but also to find ways to generate revenue to fund these infrastructure improvements and to ensure that we have revenues to fund continued operations and management of our waterfront. We have a rich recreational heritage along our waterfront, and we're looking for ways to expand that through this work effort. As we start to identify solutions, we are primarily focused on those that are multi-benefit. So it's like, hey, if we're going to add a new safe transportation infrastructure improvement to the Harbor West and Ledbetter parking lot area, why not design it in a way that also addresses the hazard impacts that we've been experiencing in this area? So one of the big ideas introduced here, and you'll see embodied in a lot of things later, is the idea of doing an elevated walking and biking path that provides that safe and separated transportation function for our users, but then is elevated above grade so it can provide that backstop to prevent the ocean water from impacting our inland areas. So taking all this information into consideration and building towards this initial list or initial ideas to start the conversation, things we're considering carrying forward in the process. It's really rooted in these 4 foundational goals here. The first is it's all about saving the sandy beach experience and enhancing recreation. It's protecting our commercial working harbor in place. It's protecting our inland areas for flooding from the ocean. And it's providing that safe, separated, and continuous walking and biking facility throughout the entire project area, ideally in combination with that flood protection measure. Like all of our projects in the Adaptation Resilience Program, we're really focused on right-sizing and phasing them based on when they're required, based on monitor on-the-ground conditions. For this project, we are primarily considering 3 project types as shown here. The first are the quick wins, which are the low-hanging fruit, lower cost, easier to implement, easier to permit, things we can largely do within existing money squirreled away in the city's capital improvement program. Things like restriping and reconfiguring parking lots, minor drainage improvements, temporary deployable floodproofing, those types of small measures. The core measures are really the foundational, holistic solutions to hazard protection for at least the next 30 years, things that provide comprehensive flood protection, like that elevated walking and biking path. The so-called future options are things that we're looking at that aren't necessarily required over the next 30 years from a hazard protection standpoint, or things that fundamentally change the actual physical nature of the coast, things like groins, things like headlands. And I also just want to add, the way we envision that these types of projects come together is that really the quick wins are stopgap measures while we work on permitting, funding, and building the core measures, which are really the things that are required for the next 30 years and will be required regardless of which potential future options we pursue later. So diving into it, starting first at Ledbetter Beach, where our vision for the space is really to maintain it as a sandy beach and recreation destination. The potential quick wins here are all about addressing pressing safety and flooding fixes, with safety primarily around that of transportation. So one idea we're exploring is essentially taking the edge of the paved area and restriping it with a concept similar to what you see on the top left, where you have separate space to walk and bike to prevent that conflict between our users and cars. Also exploring doing temporary floodproofing around key infrastructure, potentially having a low curb wall at the edge of the paved area so we prevent that undermining and partial collapse like we showed in that early photo. And then because there's the potential to impact some existing parking in this area by doing that restriping, we're looking at ways to make up those spaces within that same lot by potentially capturing some excess right-of-way, which is really in the western portion of this graphic. And it's kind of hard to see in that bottom right graphic, but there's some excess right-of-way between Shoreline Drive and the parking lot. So by expanding the parking lot there and recapturing some landscaped areas, we think we can make up those spaces. The potential core measures, really the comprehensive hazard protection moves, are really all about preserving the sandy beach experience by strategically moving things inland and allowing the shoreline to remain sandy over time. To achieve this, one idea is to take area that's currently park, convert that to sandy beach, take area that's currently pavement in the parking lot, convert that to a park or similar type use, and then behind that, introduce that idea of the elevated walking and biking path to again have that safe transportation function, but also that ultimate backstop to prevent ocean water from causing inland flooding. As part of this, there's the potential to impact some existing parking. So one idea is relocating some of that to the north side of Shoreline Drive through new multi-story parking garages there to make up those spaces. And we're also exploring some minor stormwater drainage improvements here. The potential future options along Ledbetter are really an extension of this strategy of strategically moving things inland so the shoreline can remain sandy for a longer period of time. The path could be raised higher, it could be moved inland further. Parking could be entirely consolidated on the north side of Shoreline Drive in those new multi-story garages. And then we're also exploring a potential headland at the edge of the breakwater, which you'll see in the next section, to provide some additional hazard protection and beach width. Diving now into the harbor, where the vision is maintaining it as a commercial fishing, recreation, and public access destination. The potential quick wins here are quite similar to that at Ledbetter, looking at some temporary floodproofing measures, doing some minor drainage improvements, and then creating that extension of the new restriped area so that there's a safe and separated space for our folks to walk and bike. The potential core measures are all about flood protection while prioritizing public access and boating. The big move here is exploring this raised rock revetment in front of the entire harbor commercial area. This could include a new pedestrian promenade on top of it. By doing that, we could provide a much better connection for our users from Ledbetter to the breakwater itself, as well as providing 360 circulation so folks could walk around the entire harbor commercial area. We're also looking at ways to maximize the remaining space within the harbor commercial area to really prioritize boating, public access, safer for our users to walk in. And then, like our other areas, exploring means to both enhance and raise the walking and biking paths, to provide that separation for our users that we've heard loud and clear folks want, as well as providing that backstop from flooding. And then finally, within the harbor main parking lot, looking at the question of, can we do some economic development here, convert some of this area where we found we have some excess parking capacity into something that can generate some revenue to support this project and ongoing operations and management. The potential future options are really about additional hazard protection. Can things be raised higher to withstand bigger storms, higher water levels? Should we explore this idea of the new headland shown there, and then some specific protection measures for the Action Marina itself, potentially a sand trap, potentially some wave screens. Diving now into West Beach, the vision here is really to reimagine this as the premier sandy beach destination. Because this is a relatively wide and stable beach for a long, long time, there's only one project category here, and it's some core measure projects that we're exploring. The first thing we need to do is really to address the sand quality, and so one idea is to relocate and consolidate the existing storm drain system to something that would then outfall and doesn't have that ponding and compaction issue to make that better. If we're really leaning into this idea of taking your family to the beach for a whole sandy day beach experience, we need some additional facilities to support that. So we're looking in the bottom left here about exploring some additional restrooms, showers, cafe, beach concessions, those types of things to really support that day at the beach. As with our other areas, exploring this idea of the elevated walking and biking path, really back similar to where the existing path is, provide that safe transportation component, prevent that inland flooding risk. And this here, we're exploring the idea of doing an adjacent park area with potentially an additional pedestrian pathway. This here would provide a much better connection for our users from the harbor commercial area to lower downtown, lower State Street, and the wharf, really just to emphasize that connection. And then finally, want to make it clear, we intend to retain space for small boats, outriggers to malls, and those other types of uses that exist today over on West Beach. And finally, focusing on East Beach, where the vision is similar to that at Ledbetter about really preserving and prioritizing a sandy beach and recreation destination for as long as we can. This area is certainly challenged by those high erosive conditions, but the strategy remains the same, which is allowing space for the shoreline to remain sandy for as long as we can by strategically moving things inland, taking things that are currently park, converting that to sandy beach, and then behind that having that ultimate backstop of the elevated walking and biking path. The potential future options, we end up in this paradigm where we really can't move things back further because we've moved them back to Cabrillo Boulevard. And so the question becomes, is there a mechanical or engineered way to widen the beach to keep it sandy longer, provide some additional hazard protection? To do that, we're considering exploring things like groins, headlands, and offshore reefs to do just that, as well as all of the massive trade-offs and complexities that come with those types of engineered solutions. The walking and biking path could be raised higher for bigger storms, and as with Ledbetter, exploring the potential of potentially converting an existing surface lot, that's the Garden Street lot on the left, to a multi-story parking garage to provide some additional public access parking. We also have reserved some space in the far left for that project we're about to launch to improve resiliency for the Laguna watershed. We don't quite know what the outcomes are yet, so we've generally just earmarked that space for anything that comes out from there. So I realize that was a lot. The question is, where do we go from here? We launched community engagement in early March, first at council, and then have been to 6 or 7 boards and commissions so far. We're going to 12 total. We launched a survey on Monday, and we're really continuing to do the board and commission schedule, but now focusing on additional community pop-up events. We will be at Earth Day this weekend. We'll be doing other things in the community. We'll have 2 open houses next week, as well as a virtual one the following week. We're doing direct Spanish engagement via our partners at the Promotores Network, as well as meeting with key stakeholders along the way through this process. For folks who want to get involved, the best thing they can do is to go to our website and sign up for our email list, take the survey, which is linked there, and attend one of our open houses. As I mentioned, we'll have 2 next week, Wednesday evening at the Faulkner Gallery, the following day at the Maritime Museum, and then we'll have a virtual one during the lunch hour on Wednesday, May 6th. Sure, talked a lot, would love to talk some more for anybody who has ideas on how to make this process better. My contact info is on the screen, would love to hear from you. And finally, we have a slide here to help guide your discussion today. These are questions we're asking all of the boards and commissions when we go to them and hoping you'll take a transportation lens as you answer them. The first is, are we generally headed in the right direction with these initial ideas we're considering studying further? Are there other things we missed that we should be looking at? What objectives or priorities are we missing? What key questions do you want answered when we do this follow-on technical analysis and build towards this ultimate draft plan about a year from now? And do you have any initial thoughts on timing and phasing? And that concludes my presentation. Thank you for your time.
All right, thank you so much, Mr. Bolton. I think we're going to switch it up a little bit, and we're going to go to public comment first before going back to the committee. So, are there any members of the public in person or online who'd like to comment on this item?
Yes, we have one in-person speaker, Barry Remis, and then one online speaker, Tristan Miller. So we'll first start with Barry Remis.
Welcome.
Thanks for the switch around. Good afternoon still, or good early evening. It's Barry Remis from Move Santa Barbara County. I have just one word right now. Fantastic. We want to really thank Mr. Bolton and Ms. Hetrick and their team for what's really come up with an impressive first blush, really, at what is going to be an even more important, critically important plan for adaptation for the city on so many different levels. But clearly here in the Transportation and Circulation Committee, I'm sure there's some things that have sparked your eye, just as it has with MOVE. We really want to applaud the Sustainability and Resilience team for taking the opportunity to be able to have the forthwith, have the foresight, there we go, that's what I'm looking for, to be able to address multiple items. And so as Mr. Bolton mentioned, not only are some of these critical changes necessary to be able to keep our resilience going and, save our waterfront from certain sea level rise and the impacts thereof, but also to be able to keep economic vitality, but also to be able to keep the accessibility throughout our waterfront. And so we really want to applaud and fervently support the ability to be able to make improvements to, for example, the invisible beachway through the parking lot, et cetera, so that that can be really a contiguous and throughway that walkers, bikers, rollers, and anybody with any type of mobility challenges, et cetera, can continue that access through that area. So that's going to be really fantastic to see that. And also the ability to be able to have raised access areas that really serve a double purpose of not only continuing the access and improving the access in an active way, but also to be able to help achieve the elements of the sea level rise prevention, or at least mitigation, let's put it that way. So so we were hoping that you'll, I'm sure there'll be questions and further comments from your team to be able to keep this going. And again, want to commend Mr. Bolton, who apparently must be reciting this in his sleep, but a really fantastic way to present this to everybody. So thank you so much.
No other in person? But we do have one online speaker, Tristan Miller, so I'll give you permission to speak, and then please unmute yourself and you can begin.
Hi, my name is Tristan Miller. I just wanted to call in and say this is an amazing plan. Thank you so much for presenting it and going into such detail. It's super holistic and seems like we actually are thinking through everything about how we need to adapt to climate change, so really appreciate that. I really like all of the bike infrastructure improvements. It was always extremely annoying how you had a fantastic bike infrastructure that just dumped you into a parking lot. And so the improvements specifically around the harbor and to Ledbetter are very welcomed. Appreciate it. Thank you.
Great, and those are all of our speakers.
Great. Thank you all. I'll just do a quick reminder for everyone, staff, public, we have some water and refreshments over there, so help yourself. Now we'll move to the committee. Let's start with questions first, if we can, and then switch to our comments. So any committee members with questions? We'll start down there and make our way here.
I love all of that. That's really great. Especially like the raised levees with the bike paths on top of them. One thing you didn't touch on, I'm curious about, is longshore movement of sand and sand recruitment, especially for East Beach. So we've been doing a lot of dredging as we have forever. And that sand gets dumped down on East Beach, and that causes a lot of sand recruitment. And right now, East Beach looks really great. Are we thinking in the future that that's not even going to be feasible, and we're just going to do like basically an engineered retreat where we're going to basically allow the water to just come up and go all the way to whatever rock we've dumped or protective levee that we have in front of like solid infrastructure, like the parking lot, for example, right down there by the bathhouse. And that's going to be like the new water line, and there will be no beach there, and we're not going to be dumping dredge spoils down there. And could you elaborate?
Honorable Chair and Commissioner, thank you for that question. Underlying all of our taking a step back, as part of this work effort, we did some pretty advanced technical modeling to better understand longshore and nearshore transport of sediment throughout our area. So we have a really good understanding now of how all that sediment moves and what our future erosion will look like. All the lines I showed you of those future shoreline position assume that dredging at the harbor continues. The harbor itself serves effectively as a sand trap because it's perpendicular to the shoreline. It's basically a groin, and that's why we have the sandy beaches as we know them today. So the dredging operations, from a very simplistic standpoint, is intended to essentially pretend that that sand trap isn't there. It's the sand that gets trapped by it. We just move down the coast, so we assume that there's more or less an equilibrium of sand moving west to east. In reality, and included in our modeling, some gets lost in the process, so that's not quite true. But for those future shoreline positions, that assumes that all continued management, including dredging at the harbor, continues. In terms of the impacts to East Beach, it's highly erosive today, and it only is going to become more erosive with sea level rise. So really the two options we're exploring is the nearer term, you're moving things back so that it stays sandy for as long as it can. And then it's looking into potentially groins or headlands or things that would trap more sand moving through that transport process down the coast, which could widen the beaches. I will caution, though, that putting in groins and headlands and those types of things, they're expensive, they're controversial, and you both need to consider management and maintenance when you build them, but also over time, too. Because the problem is you put those in and they widen the beach, which can be great for you, but then they can starve the down coast beaches. And a good example of that was just shown on our coast when we didn't do the dredging operations for a while and East Beach got really, really narrow because the harbor basically operated as a groin and starved our own beach down coast. So we are looking at those different types of sand retention things through this next phase, but I do want to caution that they look simpler on a quick plan view than what happens when you consider all of the things that come with those types of solutions.
Hi, Melissa Hetrick, Adaptation and Resilience Manager. I would just add that we are looking at additional beach nourishment, but it will require obtaining sand from outside the system, so either offshore or other locations. Not the easiest task. The other thing with beach nourishment that we'll be modeling, so with all these interventions, we'll be modeling how they impact the beach width and sediment movement. So we'll be able to see exactly what comes in the next 30 years with our different measures. And the goal really is to try to keep the sandy beach for as long as possible. So we'll be looking at beach nourishment, but historically, in a very erosive environment, the beach nourishment can not last that long if you don't have something like a headland or groin to keep it in place. So we'll be looking at all those different measures, but our initial option that we're prioritizing for analysis right now is retreating as much as we can to try to give as much width as possible in this time period and obtain beach that way, knowing that in the future we might have to employ things like groins or plan for access to the water directly. Yep.
Okay, that was a great answer. Thank you for informing me on that. Two other questions. Can you tell me about how you guys have looked into reefing for helping with the erosion?
Honorable Chair, thank you for the question, Commissioner. That's will be included in our follow-on analysis. We have heard that quite frequently through our engagement so far. There's a lot of interest in offshore reefs. Certainly something within the toolbox and something we'll be studying for its feasibility. I think there's a question along our shoreline about how effective it will be because we don't have as high of wave conditions as some of the other places they're being put in. But it's certainly something we will be looking at through this effort.
Okay, that's what I was wondering. I didn't know if they were, I know they're effective at building habitat. I didn't know how effective they were for mitigating coastal erosion. So that was my question. The other question, and this has nothing to do with transportation. Are you guys looking at like racked boat storage in that extra parking area that you guys are talking about in the harbor lot?
Through the chair, thank you for the question, Commissioner. Yes, we
Cool.
are looking at all sorts of ways to better optimize storage for everything, especially those that support boating uses. I think there's a high likelihood that the boat storage along West Beach that's currently all generally flat on the ground will be consolidated in a much more efficient system.
Moving to the fifth item on your slide. You identify a number of quick wins throughout your entire presentation. I was wondering, one thing that comes to mind is a way for bicyclists and pedestrians to get across the harbor and the parking lot. You know, some kind of demarked bicycle pedestrian walkway instead of just the way it is now. But in any event, so you have a bunch of quick wins in there, along with a lot of things that relate to a 30-year worst-case scenario plan, or whatever. I was wondering if there was any thought given to separating out those quick wins and maybe starting them, say, next week instead of in 2008 or 2028?
Through the chair, thank you for the question, Commissioner. That's absolutely the goal. So with the way we think the phasing works here with this project, and it gets lost in all these different project categories, is essentially the quick wins are things that we would start on as soon as council adopts this plan, which hopefully will be the end of next calendar year. So early 2028 is when we start going down that approach of potentially restriping the parking lot and some of those other things we talked about. The 30-year focus and with those core measures, we still plan to start permitting those as soon as we get the plan adopted by council, but it's just going to take some time to do permitting and funding and all the things because they're much bigger projects. So the goal is absolutely within that quick win category to do them as soon as we can after council blesses the ultimate outcomes of this plan.
But nevertheless, not before 2028.
Correct.
My question was whether or not there's any interest to move some of those quick wins to something way more current than that.
Through the chair, thank you for the question, Commissioner. It's a fair point. There's the challenge today, and we're trying to move as fast as we can on it. I think our thinking is we sort of need to have a comprehensive plan of where we're going before we start making a bunch of changes along the way. So the idea being, once we know where we're going with those core measures and potentially these future options too, it gives us a better idea of what makes the most sense to do quickly, because we don't want to do something and then a year later rip it out. But it's a fair point. We can definitely keep that into consideration to see how we can move up certain infrastructure improvements. Thank you.
All right. Other questions? Vice Chair?
Thank you for this presentation. And I was also curious about the sediment deposition that Committee Member Metzenberg brought up. To kind of piggyback on that, I think you answered most of what I was getting at, but I think just to maybe follow up what you were saying. So it does seem like the vast majority of sediment is coming from the west to the east. And I guess I was just curious, is that the majority? Like, how much are sources like, say, Mission Creek or some of the creeks flowing, are they moving any sediment? Because I know we're also, the city's also trying to make Mission Creek not flood in storm events, and how does that factor in?
Through the chair, thank you for the question, Commissioner. Our primary sediment movement through our littoral cell is primarily west to east driven. So the bulk of that entire cell moves generally from Point Conception east. There is some shifting that happens around that. There's some complex dynamics around the harbor commercial area and how that area functions. So there is in the summertime, especially with some south swells, a little bit of sediment that gets pushed back towards the west, and that's one of the reasons why West Beach is as stable and wide as it is. But generally, you're on the money west to east. There is contribution through every type of creek that comes into the ocean. I don't think those are major sediment sources based on how altered they are throughout that entire creek system. But there is some sediment that comes out through those that contributes to the entire littoral cell.
And my other question, sort of semi-related, but maybe just slightly out, is Chase Palm Park. I'm wondering, given the sea level rise and maybe saltwater incursion from below, do you have an idea about, like, how long is that grass going to be alive? Like, is that park going to be able to stay as a grassy field park?
Through the chair, thank you for the question, Commissioner. I think that's an excellent question we should answer in this next phase. I don't have that quite yet, but I think it's a very fair question we should be able to answer, so we can make sure that's included when we have the draft out. Thank you.
Well, all right. Committee Member Blackerby, you have any questions?
I did have a question. First of all, great job. This is great. As a longtime West Beach resident, I'm like, yeah, I love all the positive things being said about West Beach, but there's a lot of challenges adjacent. One question I had was, in this process, whether it's the plan or, I mean, I would assume likely, getting things approved that are, sort of more infrastructure based, what role, if any, does the Coastal Commission have in this kind of thing? Dare I say the words? Yes.
Through the chair, thank you for the question, Commissioner Blackerby. It's an excellent one. The Coastal Commission is one of 2 funding partners for this work effort. So the consultant contract and most of the staff time is funded by grants. So they played a role in helping scope and include what's in this project. Ultimately, at the conclusion of this work effort, post-council adoption, we will be processing a so-called local coastal program amendment to cover the work included in this effort. So we certainly need their approval to do any of the things we're talking about. We will likely, for the quick wins, do some more expedited permitting approaches, but there's a lot of give and take in the different types of things we're exploring. And so our approach to this and to get that ultimate certification and buy-in by the commission is to try and permit it as much of this together as one big
Yes.
package with all of those trade-offs to get the support that we need. So yes, none of this can happen without their buy-in at the end of the day.
Right. Yeah, and I'm, when you're saying like maybe parking structures near the beach, I'm sure they're like, do it, because they love coastal parking. So yeah, interesting. I think that's my only question for now. Thanks.
All right. Committee Member Rodriguez, you have any questions? All right. Any other questions? All right. I'll go last. Well, first of all, thank you both for all the work on this. It's very exciting. So high level, and sorry if I missed this in the beginning, but does this account for our current level of like global climate action, or like is this the current trajectory that we're on, or does it take into account different scenarios of how that might change? Sorry, that's a
Thank you,
thorny
Chair
question.
Bauke, for that question. It's a good one. So there's different projections for different assumptions. We're giving kind of the conservative, but not worst case scenario to you. And the one that the projection that we are basing our work on assumes that the emission rates continue as they are. So there are, if you look on this range of projections, the ones that show slower sea level rise on the bottom of the graph, those assume great reductions in greenhouse gases. And then conversely, the very high ones assume actually accelerated greenhouse gas emissions in addition to catastrophic failure of the Antarctic ice sheet. And so we're really looking at the middle. And so that assumes emissions trend as they have in the past several years, and assumes Antarctic ice sheet melting, but not catastrophic failure. That's a really dumbed down version of like a 300-page report.
That's the version I need. Okay, cool. On a lighter note, the bike path, I love the direction you're going there. I'm just curious, do we have specifics on what the width would be versus the current bike path that isn't actually a bike path?
Honorable Chair, we don't have the true design specific width yet, but it will certainly be wider than it is today. The goal is to have separated space for folks who are on bikes and folks who walk. So by definition, it will be wider. I think part of it depends on how much of a sort of like terracing approach we do.
Mm-hmm.
There's a component to this, and if we're raising it above grade, we don't want it to be just like a steep drop off on either side. We want it to have terrace down. And so it will vary in width based on where we are along the project area. There's more space in Ledbetter than there is in East Beach based on how we would move things inland. But the goal is to have a nice facility for our users, and it will be wider. And Ms. Grant may have some more specifics.
Yes, and just to add to that, when my predecessors gave me background on the beachway that exists today, it was developed solely as a bikeway for nobody else. That there was the Cabrillo sidewalks, the grand sidewalks, and then the bike path. But as you know, and I think day one, once there was the ribbon cutting, it has not been solely used as a bikeway. And so it has been a source of friction with a lot of residents. We receive a lot of feedback too. And so we do really appreciate this efforts that's underway to analyze, to look at a way to separate out the users. knowing that I think it's just a moth to light that everybody wants to be close to the water, and so because of that, looking at ways to still have the facility next to each other, but for separation, because the waterfront and between waterfront and downtown, those are our highest active transportation neighborhoods. So that is definitely something that is under review as part of this process. But as Mr. Bolton alluded to, there's so many different systems at play. And so what the final real estate at the end of the day, what does that look like? Not sure yet, other than it's all being analyzed.
Gotcha. All right. Thank you for that. So this, you're calling it the pedestrian promenade on the harbor. I was just curious specifically where that ends up. It goes from, so it would be from the current breakwater and like past the yacht club and down to the beach. Kind of, where would that, what's the direction there?
The Honorable Chair, yeah, the idea is essentially it would protect the entire harbor commercial area. So if I can find the slide, which of course is always, okay, here we go, 3-1. The vision is that it would essentially, so we have the yacht club here. It would connect to the edge of the breakwater in front of the entire harbor commercial area and then loop around here and then connect to the new walking and biking facility over here. This would maximize space for our harbor commercial area, the boating functions, while improving public access. And then from a coastal engineering standpoint, it works a little better if we kind of do it in line here so that there's not this sort of projection. So we're still, the ultimate siting design, we'll have more details when we release the draft, but conceptually, this is where we're most interested in exploring right now.
Have you had any preliminary conversations with them about putting a walkway kind of where their beach access is? I imagine they would have some thoughts.
Honorable Cho, yes, we have met with the leadership at the yacht club, and they've been included in this process.
Good. Great. And then you mentioned the Promotores network, I think. I'm just curious about the engagement that you have with them in this process, and then also if you've had engagement with Momentum Work Inc. They have a great workforce program for the folks with developmental disabilities working at the harbor. I'm curious if they've had a chance to give input on the different needs they might have.
Honorable Chair, with Promotores, we just brought them on board, and they're, I think this week started going out in the field. Our primary ask with them was trying to get the Spanish community to engage with our survey. So survey is now live. They're now out there doing the thing. This is the first time they've been involved in our process. We did an initial survey about a year ago, and they weren't on board then. They are now, when we actually have something for folks to respond to. We have not engaged that other network that you mentioned. We can.
I think that would be great.
Yeah. One more time, what was the name of it?
Momentum Work
Momentum.
Inc. Yeah,
Okay.
they have a program at the harbor with, I think, a couple dozen folks working there. Yeah.
Cool. Thank you.
Yeah. And then last couple questions relate to parking. So you mentioned there might be excess parking capacity at the harbor specifically. I assume we've kind of had an analysis about the other parking areas on the waterfront, if there's, because some of the slides you mentioned, like prioritizing replacing spaces, but maybe at the harbor we're not trying as hard to replace spaces. I'm personally not like super high strung about keeping the exact number as long as we're meeting kind of the needs. So just curious about kind of how that process works, and if like Ledbetter, for example, are we seeing the parking lot get full and a higher need to replace it?
Chair Bakke, I'll take a first stab at this question. Sort of a separate but parallel effort is we have been working with the waterfront department to update the waterfront parking study. The last time it was done was in the late 90s. And so it relates to the day-to-day. Anytime that there's a change of use at the harbor, we're trying to not have every single tenant have to do a parking analysis of the larger harbor area. So there's a definite need for that. And what we've been working on with a consultant is they have been doing some parking utilization analysis, and then it was back to staff's review where it has sort of stalled, but getting back on track again. It was just going through all the current uses right now. And one thing with the Coastal Commission was they also want to know if it's a restaurant and outdoor seating, that's something that's different than from the 90s. And so anyway, we just received that information, so we're going to comb through all that, and then that would feed into the study analysis like currently. So as tenant spaces, we're trying to not hold anybody, either private or city development applications in the process for parking. And then there's obviously then the long term, as you can see in some of those sketches, that there would involve parking removal. So at what sort of the tipping point when it comes to parking capacity. So that's what's underway right now.
I would just add to that, thank you, Ms. Grant. In terms of where we're prioritizing replacing parking and all that, I think in general, our approach is we're trying to retain good, high-quality public access. It's required for permitting, it's included in our local coastal program, it's a good thing to do anyway. So to the extent we can, we are trying to retain spaces, but there is limited space, and if we're strategically moving things inland to keep the beach sandy, there's gonna have to be some changes. I think the harbor commercial area, one of the reasons why we're prioritizing there is it sort of fits better with some of the other functions in and around that area. I think there had, and correct me if I'm wrong, Ms. Grant, more capacity than some of the other areas when we did the parking study. So it just sort of made sense, but if you think there's another place we should explore instead, I mean, we're all ears for any of this type of stuff.
All right, thank you. And then my last question is about this idea of multi-story garages on existing surface lots. And so before I make comments, I want to ask a couple questions about how far along that idea is. So have we done like fiscal analysis or economic impact analysis on, those, I think, 3 sites potentially? And then a very like logistical question is whose purview would those lots be in? Would they be waterfront, downtown parking, none of the above? And I assume that's in the future buckets category, right? Like the long-term $5 sign slide, right? Sorry, I can separate those out. That's
Honorable Chair, to answer your first question, this is the level of analysis is what's shown on the slides.
okay. Got it.
This is a very initial question of an acknowledgement, really, that there's a potential to impact some coastal access parking. So what's the easiest way to provide that replacement parking? And so this was one idea that came up early on.
Mm-hmm.
In terms of who would manage it and all that stuff, we're not that far along in the process. And same goes for a full fiscal analysis. We'll have more info when we release the draft in a year, but it's really very, very early days. If you have strong thoughts on the parking garages, love to hear it.
I will share
Ms.
that.
Grant may have something to add.
I think that would be definitely, it would be analyzed, but that would be in the very distant future to have to resort to that. And I forget what the going cost is right now. I think we're probably right around maybe $50,000 a parking space when you're doing parking structures. So ka-ching, ka-ching. So I think there's going to be a lot of other measures ahead of that. But it's still, they're looking at all different things, again, from quick wins to long term. So to ignore that or as a possibility is probably not right either. So it will be part of the analysis.
Right. And so just to clarify, there's the quick wins, core measures, and long-term future options. It falls in that last bucket.
Honorable Chair, right now it is in the core measure category. Doesn't have to be.
Gotcha.
Yep.
All right. Well, I'm sure folks have opinions. Oh, do you have more questions? Yeah. Sorry, go ahead.
Just one question. So I just realized, I don't think you said whether you're going to raise the seawall or the harbor area at all. I assume they're just staying at the current level. Is that correct?
Through the chair, thank you for the question, Commissioner. The potential new rock revetment is part of the core measure. That would be raised up higher, and then the potential future options included in that would be raising all of the hard paths and edges that exist in the harbor commercial area. Right now, we don't necessarily think that would need to happen sooner, but we'll be looking at that as part of this analysis in the next phase, if you're referring specifically to like the hard edges of the harbor today.
And I think Mr. Bolton, as he alluded to, is the last cleanup in 2023 was $3 million. So I think there is some interest to put in and elevate sooner rather than later to avoid having to pay multi-million-dollar in cleanup. So trying to be, where can we be proactive?
All right, any last questions? All right, well, go ahead.
Very quick question. Do we have grunion spawning on these beaches?
I do not know the results of the recent surveys, but we do in general. Yeah.
All right, well then we'll move on to committee member comments, and thank you for including the slide to help guide us. So who wants to start us off? Committee member Rodriguez.
I will. I'm troubled because I can't get a vision of what you're talking about. You know, and I've been on this committee for 10 years, so I'm not a newbie. I think that every time you talked about a raised bike path or elevated differences, I can't picture what you're saying. And I want to really know what you're talking about. I want to feel like I understand it. What I'm envisioning, I don't know if you, well, we've had different things presented to this committee over the years where there were amazing graphics, simulations of what it would look like. The closest thing I can see is on page 11, slide 21, opportunity for multi-benefit solutions. The elevated and separated walk and bike path. There is a fairly decent-sized picture, but I would really, if I was going to really have to vote for this project, I'd need to see a picture of the path from Ledbetter all the way down and not even the whole project, so that I could see where things are going to be elevated, where they're going to be going across things, what you're planning. So I feel really uncomfortable having an opinion when I can't picture what you're talking about.
Great comment, thank you. So at this point in the process, we're really just considering ideas. We are going to be, as part of the deliverables on this project in a year, and as part of the plan, we'll have concept plans with cross sections and all 30% plans and all that kind of stuff to look at. So really, this is just like, is the idea of a raised bike path one we should pursue and analyze in detail and consider for making plans for?
And my comment is, where? You know, yeah, raise, you know, generically, that sounds like a great idea, but I'd need to see, you know, exactly which part of the place you're thinking and why. And are you gonna do public presentations? Or comment, I missed, survey, there's a survey?
Through the chair, thank you for the question, Commissioner. We have a survey live now that will be live through May 18th, and then 2 open houses next week, as well as another open house the following week that'll be virtual.
Now,
And then anyone can send public comment to me whenever they want.
so the open houses will have this material.
Correct.
Is there any way to have models?
We're not that far along in the process, is the truth answer. I mean, this was drawn with AI as a very conceptual thing.
Yeah.
We'll
Well,
have,
thank goodness you have it, huh?
yeah, we'll have far better graphics, including all the things you referenced when we have done the full analysis of where to cite it correctly. I think there is an ongoing discussion of where do you cite it? The closer you bring it to the ocean, the better it is for our users in terms of folks want to be close to the water, but it also means you have to build a taller structure for the same amount of water protection. So there's an ongoing question and balance that comes with those types of things that we're not quite there yet. It's, as Ms. Hetrick said, is this an idea that seems worth pursuing? So we spend the time and resources to do that analysis and build towards a recommendation.
Well, like I'm sorry, I'm being slow about the particular area, but the slide you were talking about, walkway, like Ian was asking about the walkway going over the harbor. I don't have a clue what you're talking about, how that would look at all. I may like the idea if I saw a sketch or some sort of a model, even, you know, just flat, but just we're thinking of a walkway or all the way around the harbor. you know, I want to give you the right feedback, but if I don't see what you're thinking of, I can't. That's my concern. So,
Through the chair, thank you for the comments, Commissioner. We are always looking to do better on the graphics and appreciate that. I think for that one specifically, we'd included the precedent photo of the breakwater itself, which is a similar vibe to what we would be going for, which shown on the top left of that graphic
yeah.
would have, you know, the sort of rocky revetment component, and then on top would then be that pedestrian facility and some sort of probably concrete path.
The pedestrian would be on the dotted line out there?
So this green part here
That green part,
would be
okay.
the alignment of the new pathway.
Ah.
And then the form of it would look similar in concept to our existing breakwater, which is photographed here.
Sure.
Yeah.
Well, I think I know, it's a lot of work, but if there was a way to do a true sketch of where it's going to be with an actual path showing in the green area, I think you'd get a better feedback on whether people like the idea or not.
We can absolutely make sure we have that when we have the draft
See if
plan.
you can figure it out.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, I think I'll just have folks go down the line. So Committee Member Blackerby, you ready?
Sure. Yes, options are headed in the right direction. No initial concerns of significance. Yeah, I think you're considering what should be evaluated, and I'm sure the public will bring up new ideas, people especially, you know, like heavy harbor users and things like that. I appreciate the look at especially, you know, like the West Beach area going, what can we do to really, like, if this is going to be the most stable place, how can we make it better? You know, like if this is going to be the destination, then how can we improve that for the users? And so one thing that I know it's a Parks and Rec thing, but that's been discussed for, I don't know, ever, is there going to be a splash pad at where the little wading pool is, which I won't even make you answer this, but this is night herons. I know it's the problem, but yeah. Thinking about like that whole, when I think about West Beach, I think of this, yeah, there's parking and there's that, all that, but there's also like the little section, right, that's pretty underutilized. There's a small playground as well, but I would say include that too, as like, if this is the destination, don't forget about those little pieces. I say it's Parks and Rec, I think it's probably Waterfront actually, but they've been working on that, so sometimes departments have to work together. And yeah, I think things people have brought up today are good for additional analysis. The phasing makes sense to me. It's always, I mean, definitely as Public Works has learned, quick wins are important for, you know, the public to feel, you know, efficacious about their participation. So I think that's important as well. And yeah, I mean, it's always like, well, do it as soon as you can get the money and do it, whatever it is. So that's much easier said than done. But yeah, great job, and thanks for bringing this to us. We've definitely, the words catastrophic failure of the Antarctic ice sheet have never been spoken in this committee, and at least not in the past like 14 years that I've been here. So I honestly hope we never hear it again, and that it's irrelevant. But thank you for bringing us a sort of different policy area for the evening.
Commissioner Blackerby, I regret to inform that we will be returning in about a year with the draft
Just
plan.
don't say that.
And
Just
it may
don't
get
say that
mentioned
one again. That's rough.
All right, Vice Chair, do you have any comments?
Yeah, thank you for this plan. I think first off, yeah, I love the extension of the bike path. I too have ridden through that parking lot many times after having a lovely time down the rest of the bike trail. So I do love connecting that. The idea of rock walls as a item in the toolbox does make me uncomfortable. Thinking about the history of Goleta Beach, for many years, and I know Surfrider, Santa Barbara Surfrider was really active in pushing against this, but the county had consultants that said that this rock wall would protect the park, protect the parking lot, protect the beach, and it went in, and the whole beach immediately eroded straight up to the rock wall and then behind the rock wall. And I asked about grunions because there were grunions behind the rock wall kind of flopping around all sadly. And so, yeah, I think that makes me uncomfortable as a strategy. That, and I know obviously there's very complicated fluvial dynamics and it changes from storm year to storm year, but that the Goleta Beach stayed completely eroded up to the wall right up until the Thomas Fire debris was all taken and dumped at Goleta Beach, and that provided the like rough cobble mixture that actually slowed down the waves and then allowed the sand to reaccumulate. So looking at this, and again, I know these are just very rough drawings, but I get on that same, I think it's slide 21, that kind of rough image. I would love to see that sloped area towards the beach be as wide and as sloped and as rough and cobbly as possible to allow sand to accumulate. I am really nervous about the idea of just having any kind of rock wall or cement wall. I think it could very well destroy the area. The other thing I mentioned about talking about Chase Palm Park, I do know at UCSB we have what is called a commencement green, which is the lovely lawn that is right above the lagoon. And that's where they call it commencement green because that's where they hold graduation, because it's much nicer to bring your parents to graduation by the lagoon rather than the sad stadium by the airport on the other side of campus. But as my understanding is they are dumping fertilizer on that lawn to keep it alive as the salt water is raising up and making it harder and harder for the grass to survive. So I think that just needs to be part of this plan, whether it is switching to, and I think you could also talk to, at UCSB, it would be Matt O'Carroll, heads up the ground staff as to exactly how that's going. But the park areas may need different species of grass, or just for it to be known that they may not live forever. Because, yeah, and then once you're dumping fertilizer on them, obviously that's just going right into the ocean. So I think those are my comments. So thank you.
Committee Member Smith, do you have any comments? All right. Committee Member Bickford? Committee Member Metzenberg?
I just want to reiterate how much I like the idea of, using levees as something else aside from just a levee. And I love that you guys thought about putting bike paths on top of them and kind of, even from your AI rendering, really Santa Barbara-fying how they look. I think that'd be a tremendous aesthetic as well as just the general use of an engineering solution aside from what it was originally intended for, having multi-uses to it, I thought was brilliant. So I wish you guys luck with that, and I hope to see it one day.
Yeah, go ahead.
I apologize. Now that everybody's talked, I wanted to add one more thing. There's a tremendous amount of work here. I want to make sure you understand that I see that. That I'm not, but that I just feel anytime when you've talked about raised bike paths or raised pedestrian or separated, if you could have a specific AI-generated picture that is where that is right now, the actual place where you would change it to show to people at a presentation, I think it would really help you get your word across.
Through the chair, thank you for that comment.
All right. Thank you all. Yeah, I second many of the comments. This is a really exciting direction to go in, and I love all the sort of multifaceted, multi-purpose solutions that are being proposed. I love the pedestrian walkway and widened bike path. I think would solve a lot of the current issues, as was alluded to. Just really randomly, Miami Beach, I went there, has a really cool and I think pretty close to Santa Barbara aesthetic sort of separate from the beach. Then there's like kind of areas that curve out where you can like put your, they have little showers, you can put your flip-flops on, change, and then there's the multi-use path. And then there's another separation with like landscaping, and then you get to buildings and the street. And I think that kind of could be a good example to look at. Love the idea of installing new restrooms. Very, very desperately needed in this area and many of our other high traffic areas. Obviously, implementation is important with those, so folks feel comfortable with those. I think we got some negative viral social media attention recently for our downtown restrooms, and I would want to avoid that, so there's probably something to be learned there. So yeah, I love pretty much everything about this. I think the pedestrian sort of wraparound on the harbor is very interesting. I'm not like fully committed to, 2 thumbs up on it just yet. I think, yeah, some more representation of that could be warranted, especially with how it might change how some of the tenants use their space. But I think the concept of the harbor becoming more pedestrian friendly and more of just like a place to hang out that's like a little bit more, like there are some great spots to it, but if you expanding the opportunities for people just to exist in that sort of third space of the harbor would be great. I think for folks who are there all the time or just visitors. And so, yeah, the only thing that I'm going to pick on is this multi-story parking idea. Extremely skeptical, to say the least, about that. I want to just say that now before this idea gets too solidified as what people expect from those lots. I don't think it's the highest and best use of that extremely valuable real estate. And, Ms. Grant alluded to the cost of per space of most parking garages, per lot. Conservatively, today you could build one for $20 million each on the low end. So if we're talking 3 different lots, $60 million, I think I have a really hard time seeing that justifying itself. I think the key is what you said, is maintaining, for the Coastal Commission, maintaining that access. Does that access look a little different? I think with $60 million, we could, committee member Blackerby knows, we could fund the downtown waterfront shuttle as it used to exist. Think of
1 minute headway.
Right. I did some back of the napkin math. You could fund it at 2019 levels for 50 years at that price. And I think that would have clear economic, tailwinds behind it, and, use some of our excess parking capacity in our downtown lots so folks can do that. Both, a lot of visitors do the waterfront and downtown simultaneously, and it's important that we have, more quick mobility options for folks that don't want to walk up and down the whole thing or aren't using bikes. So I think that's the direction I'd like to see. That's the only missing thing I see here on the transportation side is the role of public transportation. And yeah, I would love to go that direction. And I think, some of these lots, now that the Coastal Commission has warmed up to the concept of housing by beaches, I think that would be much more of the direction I'd want to see the city go in with those lots. I know there's appetite now at the city for that downtown, and I think that would be true here as well, and it would benefit a lot of the tenants and employers, I think, to have more housing in their close proximity. I know I've had some real preliminary kind of dorm room style conversations with City College leadership folks about those lots and the idea of putting housing there or some sort of mixed use thing. And I think that would be a lot more beneficial to the whole waterfront ecosystem than a multi-story garage. Not saying it's completely like ridiculous or anything. I think, it depends on the demands of parking that we're going to see. But I think it's a really high bar to build one of those. So that's my only critique. Otherwise, I think this is amazing and very excited to see some of the implementation. Any other last comments or questions from the committee? All right, with that, thank you both so much for your time and for your presentation. And
Chair Bonke, can I suggest maybe a 5-minute
Yes, I was
health
gonna
break?
ask.
And then, if that's
let's
okay.
do 5 minutes, so we'll be back at 7 on the dot. All right. call this meeting back to order, and then we're going to move on to our next and last item here, the Safe Streets for All planning effort, review of the draft action plan. So, Ms. Grant, could you please reintroduce this?
Yes, for the record, Jessica Grant, Supervising Transportation Planner with the city. Very excited. We've had a lot of meetings on the Safety Action Network, and before you tonight is the draft plan. And so our recommendation would be that the committee forward the plan to City Council for review and subsequent adoption. For background, for those that might be listening in remotely, or if they haven't tuned in before, just wanted to have a couple words of background about the action planning effort. We received a federal grant. We kicked it off, the planning effort, back in fall of 2024. And really the goal is to prevent traffic safety-related fatalities and serious injuries within the city while increasing safe, healthy, and equitable mobility for all by strategically identifying infrastructure improvements that remove barriers to safe mobility. As part of the grant requirements, the items on the left are all the required chapters that we have to have, but we also added chapters for past and present approach to traffic safety and safe routes to school. And so far, through this since the fall, we've been releasing chapters over time. The only new chapter that you'll be seeing tonight is the strategy and project selections. And then you have seen the results of the engagement, but that's sort of the new chapter 2 of just explaining all the community touch points to date, and also stakeholder review and interdepartmental review as well. And in the audience, we have Commander Payne, who has been a tremendous help and asset during this planning effort, too, with the police department. And we also had Representatives Ryan Giulio working closely with him. And, of course, Derek Bailey, who may be showing up tonight. He is coming off of just joining our continent. And so we'll see if how strong the jet lag is. So really tonight, because you have seen the chapters, I did want to just briefly highlight what the changes have been since your last review. But there's Mr. Bailey. His yay, bright-eyed. Definitely on a different time zone. So, but yes, it's nice to see him as well. So, I will go through these chapters quicker than we have been, just because we've had dedicated meetings on these particular chapters. So, for the leadership, commitment, and goal setting, some of the things that we added was a little bit more information on the complete streets portion of it, and also if there's reasons for maybe exemptions why a corridor might qualify for not doing complete streets. Say we're doing maintenance and repair or those types of things, but there's reasonings in there. But that was, I think, the primary change to that. And then also we have, I believe in I think it's shifted in the policy section. Well, what if you're not at zero by 2030? What does that look like? So we tried to add some more policies related to that. And essentially, in a nutshell, it would be to find ways to fast track any of the safety infrastructure improvements. No changes to the planning structure. Again, it just talks about the review committees that have seen this portions of the plan and its development. Past and current approach to traffic safety. Pretty much it has stayed the same, except working with Commander Payne, we updated one of the charts related to traffic safety stops and citations, because not every traffic safety stop results in a citation, and a lot of the enforcement is focused enforcement, and it's just educating the community about maybe there is a traffic safety violation or FYI, but not everything results in a ticket. So just wanted to reference all the sort of resident touch points with that. For the safety analysis chapter, again, largely it has stayed the same. We had a minor updates for the high injury network. And then there was on the bicycle collisions map and at fault, we had, when we initially released the safety chapter, it was early into, I guess, 2025. And so we hadn't finalized, or the police department, all the unknown, and since that time we have. So I think that this trending story that we're seeing kind of from 2023, 2024, and then we have preliminary statistics too for 2025, is the at fault for the like cyclist versus vehicle or driver, with it's tipping towards the more at fault for the cyclists. So that has been a change, I think, from prior years. So that's something that we'll continue to monitor. And again, the big part of the safety chapter, again, I keep highlighting it because this really, the safety chapter is what is sort of the impetus for all the other chapters. And if we had to triage our roadway system and spend infrastructure money, knowing that city governments never seem to be in a surplus of funds, and so you have to think strategically. And the area that you see on the map in red and orange, that's 20% of our road miles in the city, but that contributes to 88% of the severe and fatal injuries. That also reminds me in the safety chapter too, there is some nuances. We typically, at least in my presentations, it's a little bit easier to say some of the categories. There's, of course, fatal, and then there's the severe injury category. There are slight differences in the nomenclature for that, depending upon what source you're using. And so for collision reports, it's actually suspected serious injury. But when you dive into the content of severe injury and suspected serious injury, what makes up that category is essentially the same. But we did update all the graphics just to have that dual nomenclature, just so it's recognized as both categories. And again, it's something that the police department, our traffic collisions, they've have gone towards the suspected serious injury, suspected minor injury, in the kind of from 2024 on for collision reporting. So just wanted to say that that's the labels, and it's not necessarily a local thing. It's but not all jurisdictions in the state have gone there yet. And so anyway, long story short, we have both in the narrative. Mm-hmm. For engagement and collaboration, again, is just describing the processes to date. The only thing that is missing from that chapter is we will be having a couple of community meetings again on the engineering approaches to the priority streets. That's something that we wanted to circle back on, because the last touch point was in October, where we were talking about where we should be focusing engineering improvements on various roadways, but we didn't have approaches at that time. We just wanted to introduce where the issue areas were. So now we have that information. We'll be going through that tonight, but we wanted to return to the public at large for that. So that would be a narrative that would be added before it goes to City Council. For equity considerations, we did a couple minor updates. The Active Transportation Grant Cycle 8 just was released, and so there's more rubrics at the state level and updated qualifying areas, and so that has been updated in our plan for those graphics. It's really the only graphically that changes the median income and map, and then the table for free and reduced lunches. Some of the percentages have changed from school to school. So I was reflecting, again, this plan is a snapshot in time. Anytime we apply for a grant, we always have to look at the sources. But at this point in time, I wanted to have the most updated information. There wasn't any changes at the federal level or regional level. And then I do really appreciate the committee's comments. So we did add how the city has addressed equity and traffic safety. So we did add all of the projects that we've done to date that are in qualified underserved areas. So thank you for those comments. And then there was the broader comments, because there's equity in terms of like income, and from a racial standpoint, but then there's just equity in terms of modes of travel. And thank you for bringing that up. And so we did add a section on that, on sort of the change in cost effectiveness between the various modes of transportation, and how costly it is to own a vehicle, from insurance to gas, or parking, all those items, versus owning just a bicycle or taking public transit. So we tried to capture that in the narrative as well. The policies, again, we went through, we added some stronger policies between the police department and public works department coordination to outline that in a little bit more detail. And I think Chair Bakke, you had a comment about before, and we're still not sure how to best address it, is it's the issue with emergency access, like what trumps what versus the day-to-day, like maybe traffic calming that would also have tremendous benefit, for example, on a safe routes, the school route. And so we didn't have a change. We're looking if there is a follow-up suggestion, but I think it's, with anything we work on, it's always a discussion that we need to look at, that yes, we need to still be able to maintain emergency access for the different, from fire, from a AMR, for police department standpoint, but also we don't want the intersection to be the cause when it is at the intersections that's unsafe, that we could provide safety enhancements too. So it's kind of the ongoing dialogue. So we still wanted to reflect the policies for that. And then I think Committee Member Blackerby, I ran out of time, but for existing traffic safety policies, we're still just referencing them as a background, but I did not have the chance, or we did not have the chance to answer where we're at on all of those. And so if we do have a little bit more time, I will try to make the attempt before it goes to council for that. Safe routes to school, since you reviewed it, the in February, we did have follow-up stakeholder meetings with representatives from the Santa Barbara School District, from Hope School District. We also met with Move Again, and so we have some updated narrative for that and updated policies. I think with anything, when the government has its own language, the school district has its own language, all of that, and so we rewrote some of the policies on sort of what we need to do. I think the biggest thing is the goal would be to have safe routes to school education for happening at every school. And I think where we understand, talking now with the school districts, they have their own like safety plans for the school. So it's policies within that. So that's what we have the policies, is to try to get that into the school district policies, if that makes sense. And then one of the things, we ended up updating the youth-involved collision maps. We added an at fault just to have an idea with that. And that was really interesting, just going through the data again for that. And so it's youth-involved collisions while driving, youth-involved collisions while biking, youth-involved collisions walking, and then youth-involved collisions where youth is a passenger. Most of the time passenger in a vehicle, but there is some where they're passengers on a bike. So anyway, we added a little bit updated maps for that. And I mentioned it in the announcements, but we will be going before the Youth Council on May 4th and sharing that data and findings. I don't a little bit deeper on what are the primary collision factors for that. It's really interesting because youth are trending more on the fault categories for all of those, and how best, again, when we think of all the E's, there's engineering solutions, there's focused enforcement solutions, but there's really a lot of them are traffic safety related, and just understanding that. So we have some traffic safety messaging too, and how we can, what would resonate with the sort of junior high school audience, as far as how best to disseminate that information. All right, so here's the big picture. Before I jump into this, I forgot one other item. It's an important item. It relates to our safety chapter, and it's something that related with just Vision Zero in general. Is we had been wanting to get trauma-related data on collisions. We've been trying for years to obtain this data. We did receive data, so it's really exciting. But before anything goes to print, we want to circle back with Cottage Hospital just to make sure we're understanding the data correctly, and if it could be, we're attempting to map what could be mapped. What we're seeing, just big picture, just as an FYI, is that a lot of the collisions, but again, we're trying to look for that gap in what we see in police collisions, and then who might be ending up at the hospital, but maybe there wasn't a police collision report. And so anyway, what we're seeing spatially is closely following the high injury network. There's a couple anomalies that we want to check in, kind of in the Riviera area and sort of one area in downtown, but we just want to make sure that we're understanding the data correctly before anything is printed. But we're just beyond excited, and thank committee member Rodriguez for helping push some of that wants along as well. So I do feel like as we move forward that this is not a one-time thing for data sharing. I think that, and that's what we have in our policies, is that we have continued conversations yearly when we're reviewing our traffic collision data. All right, now let's go into the meat of, this is the, okay, besides the safety chapter, this is a really big chapter, is, okay, what's sort of gonna inform the next big projects that are on the highway or high injury network. And so part of this is strategies and then actual project priority safety projects. So we'll go over each of the 6 categories for the strategies. So again, it's to, if we had to triage our roadway system, the areas in red and orange are the areas that we want to be focusing on. And then what does it mean when we think of engineering approaches? We wanted to create a toolbox, and it's called the traffic safety countermeasures. Up here are the thumbnails. We had some interesting versioning that there was some different thumbnails that printed in the chapter, and so we had reprinted the updated chapter. Anyway, we're using different programs, and there was a little hiccup, but these are the ones that we feel are the priority countermeasures, but there's a lot more countermeasures also involved. So that's in one of your Appendix E, is in detail what the kind of all the toolbox. But as far as what we're envisioning of most used items, that's what's up on the screen. All right, so let's go now into implement priority safety projects. That's the 3rd strategy. So the last time that you all saw these particular roadways, there's 10 of them, was back in October of 2025 when we were going over sort of the collision pattern history and what we were wanting for feedback from the committee and then also from the community. And last meeting, we touched on, we shared what we heard from the community about these priority streets. So now I'll go over what are some of the priority items for each of these streets. And I realize that it's a little hard to see all of the detail, but let me know again if I can zoom in as needed. For Bass Street, just in general, how we set this up, we really liked the city of Burbank's, the way they put together their safety action plan, as far as just the goal was to try to make the graphics simple. And then it was broken up between recommended at, like, for single intersections, mid-block improvements, or at stop-controlled intersections. And doing this action plan is not the first time we've thought about safety on our various streets. So we also wanted to note if we have done something recently on a particular corridor. So with that, on this, there wasn't a lot of groundbreaking changes proposed here, other than adding additional lighting along this corridor. From the community, kind of what we heard, both things, that on-street parking is really important. And then from some of the bike community, continue those bike lanes. We did literally go out at different times of day, during the weekday, weekends, just to run a on-street parking assessment. And bottom line is it's full all the time. And so until there's sort of a shift in needs for the on-street parking, we're not proposing the bike lane to continue at this point in time, other than we don't think it should be off the table completely. And so we still have it as a long-term vision to look at continuing the bike lanes. Oh, yeah. Yeah. Yes.
So, in the green, there's the sort of key, but not every, there's the same key on every page, but there's not something in each one on that, right?
Right. It's just to have some icon of what, if there has been any infrastructure changes, then it has an icon on there. So for example, at Bath and Junipero, there were stop signs recently installed there.
But like, okay, but you mentioned something about streetlights, but there's not any streetlights.
Correct. I think that's what we struggled with without making these graphics totally busy. So we've just narratively said add streetlights, but as far as the spacing, we weren't sure if that would make it too busy, because then you would see a bunch of the orange dots.
Well, I mean,
It's
sorry to speak out of turn, but
no.
if it's in your key
Okay.
and it's not on the map, then that means there's no streetlights. So either take it off the key or put it on. I think you could get away with it to put it there. Because I'm like, that's a super, I used to live there. I'm like, super dark corridor, like especially from Quinto and Alomar. And so I don't know if that's where some are suggested, but I would say put them
It
on
would
there
be,
if you're.
yes, definitely. We have some at the intersection, but yeah, it would be in this particular case, through the mid blocks as well. And then there's kind of a formula for spacing, so we could add that if that's, a suggestion. Okay. Thank you for that. I'm gonna. All right, add streetlights. Okay. Now, and as far as these streets, they're in alphabetical order, so they're not necessarily mentioned in the pecking order of what should be funded first or any of that. They're just purely, again, in alphabetical order. What we're, again, with Calle Real, it's been in our capital program to have a widened sidewalk path basically from Oak Park all the way to La Cumbra Road. And so, and the portion between, essentially from the Oak Park to Las Positas, that is funded, and we're in final design on that portion of it. But then there's going then north, of Las Positas to La Cumbra. So I think that this would be built over time as far as properties redevelop. Of course, we've seen the Sears redevelopment project and that we do have a required condition for them to construct a portion of that path in front of their property. So they have not gone to a hearing yet, but I do know, at least on the latest plan sets, that has been incorporated. And as far as for sections, the right-of-way, we did get all of these roadways surveyed, and it really changes in width in different sections for it. But the graphics to the right are sort of showing conceptually of what that looks like for the sidewalk/path. We're still retaining on-street bike lanes for the very confident cyclists, but if we envision the sidewalk be used for, again, there's for slower moving travelers and pedestrians, or slower moving cyclists, like kids going to school. But it's just proposed, we don't have a timeline. It's all part of just suggestions on infrastructure improvements. In Calle Real, as far as for comments, when we received the survey results back, it really was, Calle Real was one of them, Upper State Street and Las Positas, where the streets that we received the most comments on, and De La Vina. Now we're going to Canon Perdido Street. There's a lot of work happening, that has happened and happening soon with some of the intersections. There's already, where you see in blue, those are on-street bike lanes, both going east and west. We do think we can extend the bike lane from on Canon Perdido from Santa Barbara. Oh, sorry, Anacapa. Thank you. From Anacapa to Chapala. But as far, we only have enough real estate right now, if we were to retain on-street parking on both sides, that we could only get it in one direction. So we're still doing the camera counts to see what is the most dominant movement for the cyclists. Is it the east movement or the west movement? So that's what we're looking at for this. Yes.
I think maybe we can encourage folks to ask questions on particular things as we go through.
Sure.
Just so that we don't forget. So any thought to putting the parking in front of the bike lane as a protection mechanism instead of having it in between?
And I'll have, Mr. Bailey just add, as far as for the, of how much real estate we have and if that is a feasible option.
Great question. Generally, parking protected bike lanes are not feasible in Santa Barbara due to our street width. Once you move the parking away from the curb, there's very few streets in Santa Barbara where you're left with 20 feet left over for an emergency access lane. A parking protected bike lane is going to require at least 7 or 8 feet in width by the time you have your bike lane and a buffer for car doors to open, whereas a parking or bike lane on the traffic side, it can be as narrow as 5 feet. We like 6.5 is much more comfortable, so you can get out of the door zone. But the parking protected bike lanes, A, they take up more space, and B, just due to our street widths, you rarely are left with enough for emergency access.
Okay, fair point. Thank you.
And there is a parking lot at the corner of State and Gutierrez, because we're concerned, aren't we talking about Anacapa and Canon Perdido? Oh, a little
Canon
higher
Perdido,
up, sorry.
yeah, higher up. It's lot 9, that's at Anacapa of Canon Perdido. We did a long-term item again as maybe as autonomous vehicles come online or other measures where the on-street parking is not seen as precious anymore, to still look at then putting bike lanes on both sides of the street. All right, Castillo. No major items other than the lighting. So to committee member Blackerby, we can add in those icons. And I do have that pretty much for most of the suggested item or recommended items are unfunded. There are some overlap where we're working on funded grants, but most of them would go in as unfunded needs. But if we return for council, it would be to then seek funding with approval of the action plan. And just for context, again, if we were going to go after the same program monies, you have to have an adopted action plan before you have implementation projects. For Chapala, we're recommending just installing high visibility crosswalks at all the intersections and compliant access ramps. De La Vina, so this has been we've done the lane reduction in the Upper State Street area adjacent to Cottage Hospital, and then there's been a lane reduction again due to our traffic collision patterns in the downtown area. There was a lot of residents that have, not only in this survey, but separately, I think, from other meetings that we've been contacted with, is to look at the lane reduction in this section here for emission to Mitchell Tarina. We have it, Derek, let's see, it would be shy of Mitchell Tarina at is it Valerio? Yes, Valerio and Arriaga, where again from Mission to between Valerio and Arriaga, we're interested in doing a pilot program for restriping. So it'd be a temporary restriping. Mr. Bailey's team they've done some temporary closures of one of the lanes. It's hard to do sometimes lane closures, and they look sort of like construction is happening, so you don't necessarily see the full behavioral items, and so we're looking at, again, making sure circulation's still happening, and congestion is still a thing that our community is sensitive to. And so there was a couple times of day where there was some congestion, but would there be congestion if it didn't have a bunch of cones blocking off the lane? And so we're recommending to try it as a pilot to see if we can do that. And we just happen to have some upcoming pavement maintenance scheduled. And so this would be a good time to do a pilot. If systems are running okay, then we'd return to City Council to see if that could be done permanently.
How do you run it as a pilot? You actually put down striping that's just not the super permanent thick stuff?
Yeah. I'll have Mr. Bailey just describe the little nuances for that.
Another great question. Old Town Goleta Hollister project is a great example of they're calling it an interim project, but they use less durable pavement markings that are actually starting to wear out now that the project's been in place for about a year and a half. So we would do something similar to that, less durable pavement markings that could be removed easier if the project doesn't go very well. And then if the project does go well, or either way, more durable pavement markings would be put back in with the ultimate configuration.
Okay, great. And I just wanted to add, I appreciate that you did the experiments, and I don't doubt your results. But people do adapt. A lot of people have choices of different ways to go home, and if one way gets a little too busy, they can hopefully use another. So I hope it works out. I'm just
and to just piggyback off of the adapt comment, for us, that when we're doing when we're analyzing it, typically takes like 3 to upwards of like 6 months for that adaptation because we do receive lots of complaints typically in the maybe first couple weeks, and then things start to settle out as people have different routes or just get used to whatever the treatment is.
I want to ask Derek one question before he sits down. I come up West Mission a lot from my neighborhood, coming from Hidden Valley to downtown to whatever I'm doing. So I'm experiencing is that I can turn right on Castillo. Is that yeah, and it's a one lane, and it's pretty easy because it's one lane with parking on both sides and biking. And then I can go all the way across state and come down Anacapa, same way. It's simple. And De La Vina is, I don't know whether people think, well, it still has two lanes, so I'll have more room to drive. I'm just wondering if it's becoming more crowded because, I don't want to take that one lane street, because it's almost like an E in my mind. You have three ways you can get to downtown somehow. And my husband had a serious almost run-in with a guy on De La Vina because there was a bicyclist who did not belong on De La Vina. And then my husband in his car, and then there was a truck next to him, and it was really scary, They were very close to an accident. So that was right around the Upham Hotel. So
We've done quite a bit of analysis on this one, and there's no clear answer, and that's why we're thinking a pilot might be an appropriate way to go. The computer model says it works the vast majority of the time. Our in-field experiment where we closed the lane showed that there was some pretty significant congestion at times. But as Ms. Grant pointed out, drivers behave differently when there's change and when there's a lot of cones, everybody's a little tentative. So what's the real answer? It's probably somewhere in between, but it's really hard for us to quantify. But we are quite sure that as you keep going south on De La Vina Street, and particularly once you get to Arriaga, Mitchell-Trena, and then to Sola, where the Upham is, then 2 lanes really is needed to accommodate the traffic volumes. From a connectivity perspective.
How do you keep the bicyclists out of your way? They're not supposed to be on that street.
Legally, bikes can be there.
Pardon me?
Legally, bikes can be on De La Vina Street.
Yeah. Cyclists can be
Anywhere they
on any city roadway network. You do not have to have a bike lane. They are allowed by law in the California Vehicle Code to take the lane. Typically, take the lane is still that you're taking to the rightmost side. That's the cringe to me, but but you also want to, as a cyclist, you want to stay out of the door zone. So to stay out of the door zone, you're pretty close to the middle of a traffic lane, and that's allowed. But it's interesting that you bring that up because I thought it was an anomaly when I received a call about that well, the cyclist is allowed to be there. And that is a thing that we're hearing in public comments. So it's like, how do we message that cyclists are allowed so you don't have that friction, because there is friction. There is a portion of our population that gets really angry when a cyclist is by law allowed to take the lane.
I want to be real clear. My husband is a cyclist, but he happened to be driving a car that day, and there's 2 lanes and a bike, and there's just not enough space for everybody. That's the kind of issue I'm talking about. And our city has done a lot to provide bike lanes so that bicyclists can take alternate routes and not be wedged in between cars. It seems that way.
This one is a kind of a unique situation. I live basically further up De La Vina, and if I'm going downtown, I would take the De La Vina bike lane. It's great. If I'm heading for state, I have a choice of either crossing over to Castillo and then coming back across, which is a bunch of extra blocks. It's not a big deal, or I can turn left before I get to Mission, and then I've got a big hill. Or I just go to Mission, and then I'm stuck. There's absolutely nowhere to go. You're just stuck, or you take the lane. So
It's
You know,
a
if it-
shared lane, right? You're talking about the bike and car shared lane.
Yeah, yeah,
Okay,
just
I just wanted to be
going into
clear.
traffic
Yeah,
lane.
yeah.
You know, if I actually have business at that intersection, I often end up riding out on the sidewalk. Because it's, you know, I just go slowly and carefully and, you know, it's either that or I sprint.
All right, I think.
And that's, I think, yeah, to get back, but yeah, that is definitely, this is what an interest, because we have heard a lot from the community to continue that, yeah, a dedicated bike lane. And we've also heard as for drivers that the lane reduction is also a lot lower stress facility because you're not having to be so close next to another vehicular lane, and of course like the double jeopardy issues too between for pedestrian cyclists with vehicles. When one vehicle stopped, you don't know why they're stopping, and the other vehicle blows by, and then it's at risk of hitting somebody. So anyway, from that standpoint, we're hearing positive things about that. So to be continued, it's so that's
Just process-wise too.
Yep.
So that, we'll see what city council says when we take it to city council in the coming months, but what we're expecting is public meetings, return to your commission, and then likely approval from council, you know, unless council just tells us just go do it, which is possible. But we're kind of expecting 3 more meetings that are going to dive into this one in a little bit more detail.
All right, Derek, thank you for taking our questions. So just real quick on this one. So I recall at the webinar about this comment about like 23 hours a day. It's all right, 1 hour a day, crazy congestion. Could you like give us some quantifiables, like what that means? Like how much of a delay are we talking on a person's overall route, say from Mission to Creo? I mean, is it 30 seconds or 5 minutes or?
Great question. So the congestion point that people will likely experience is at the Mission Street intersection itself.
Okay.
So if you're coming down De La Vina Street, it's at Mission and getting through Mission. So what is congestion? People generally feel like if I don't make it through on the first light, there's a problem. So that's kind of the metric we're using, is if you can't make it through on the first light, then, you know, yeah, that's what we're trying to avoid. There are some intersections in Santa Barbara where that's like a recurring thing during peak hours, typically the interchanges, but on city intersections, that doesn't happen very frequently. So that's what we're going to quantify and share with people. Once you get through the Mission Street intersection and it's free flowing, very little delay, like you're talking seconds difference between one lane and 2 lane. But it's really how that Mission Street intersection performs.
Not to get too in the weeds, but that is signalized fully all 4 ways, right? That intersection.
De La Vina Mission, yes.
So theoretically would like, I just can't imagine what is causing that congestion in the intersection. Is it people turning right from Mission onto De La Vina and people like conflicting with them, or?
Pardon me?
Is that where Mission narrows by a lane?
Yeah, between
It narrows the next lane over.
Mission east towards Chapala Street is where it goes from 2 lanes in each direction to 1 in each direction. There's enough traffic that comes down De La Vina Street, and it's free flowing all the way down from Alomar.
Right. Okay.
So
I see. That's
it speaks to how well a single lane can perform if there's no signals along the way. But once you get to that signal and there's green time that has to be allocated to the cross movement, then it breaks up that flow.
Okay, that makes sense. Thank you.
There's also a lot of traffic on Mission, and so that light has to be given also plenty of time as in the green cycle.
Got it. Okay, cool. I think we've dissected this one enough. But I think the questions are really good, but maybe we can keep the specific point of views on the street treatments to our comments when we get to those. I know it's hard to get through all 10 and remember it all, but yeah, we'll keep going.
For Las Positas, what we're looking at, it would be a connection from state, ideally all the way to MoDOC, because from a bike network standpoint, would be to get over the freeway to then connect into the other neighborhoods on Las Positas, Hidden Valley, to the beach, or to the west side. What we're proposing is on this, again, high volumes, higher speeds on Las Positas within and an elementary school, and really a community place for Earl Warren Showgrounds too, to have separated facilities on this for separating road users. So separating the cyclists from the roadway. We would be proposing it on the golf course and Adams Elementary side. And then also having a separate sidewalk. There are a lot of cross sections in your attachment, and I just took one because every cross section there's a little bit different configuration of the road, but conceptually that's the goal. And then the sidewalk's very narrow along Las Positas on the sort of the residence side. So looking for an opportunity to introduce a parkway right from San Onofre, which is the sort of the main school entrance, down, and then we have a gap in our sidewalk where between Stanley and McKenzie. So looking to introduce sidewalk there. And then under more analysis is just, again, how do we treat the Macaw-Las Positas intersection? So we wanted to evaluate further potential traffic signals. We just put in the pedestrian hawk at Stanley and Las Positas. I'm going to continue to watch and evaluate that, and if eventually a traffic signal would be warranted. So that's essentially with Las Positas. As far as, again, we want to connect to MoDOC, still not quite sure how to do it over the freeway interchange. So we need to, so that's why we have the little sort of magnifying glass. We need to study that in a little bit more detail.
Gotcha. Just a clarifying question or two about this. So I'm looking at not the slides, but the actual document. That's the concept TBD thing. Okay, cool. And so are we envisioning this being an engineering solution all the way to MoDOC itself?
Yes.
Or cutting short? Okay. And so is that all city jurisdiction, or is that Caltrans jurisdiction?
We would need to coordinate with Caltrans for the interchange part would be under their jurisdiction.
I asked because I had a conversation about this intersection yesterday. So are the slip lanes ours or Caltrans, like going up MoDOC into Las Positas? I'm not sure where we end and where they begin.
Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you.
For the public's benefit. Do you know where the train bridge is?
Yeah.
Yeah, so the train bridge north to the highway is Caltrans. Below the train bridge is city jurisdiction.
Got it. Okay. Okay, thank you. That's my only question. Does anyone have a question about this one? All right.
Okay.
I think we can. There you go. Move on.
Nepal Street, this is, again, it's from Coda to essentially Quinientos. This is a street that runs or intersects right at Coda, and Nepal is where Santa Barbara Junior High is. So we've recently installed curb extensions and high visibility crossings, upgraded the rapid flashing beacons there. And we, as far as for additional opportunities, there are opportunities for more lighting, and then to install high visibility crosswalks and lighting at Nepal Gutierrez and Nepal Jennings. And this is not the first time we we've heard some of these requests in those areas. We've with the East Side Neighborhood Transportation Management Planning effort, and through other things, is because it's in the vicinity of Our Lady of Guadalupe too. So there's a lot of pedestrian traffic in that area. So we want to continue to make sure that that is on our radar and documented to seek grant funding for those. The next is Olive Street between Mitchell Terena and Carrillo Street. We've recently had done high visibility crossings at Olive Carrillo. We want to look to expand on that to have curb extensions there and Olive Figueroa. Both of those intersections are like side entrances to Santa Barbara High School. So it's something that we've wanted to have that added improvement. And then still monitoring the speed control for that in the long term for that. All right, Upper State Street. Oof. There's a lot to unpack with Upper State Street. I think just from a land use standpoint, again, in my world, I dabble in both land development and capital planning. And so we see what's going before us in terms of land development projects and what we anticipate to be redeveloped. And so I think definitely with Upper State Street, it's going to be a multi-prong approach with as properties redevelop and then with city monies too to get to a larger vision. I think the biggest thing is to try to elevate the cyclists off of the roadway to have them at sidewalk level. So they have the concept on the top would be, I think we call it on the attachment concept 1, and then concept 2 is essentially the same thing other than wider sidewalks, because the sidewalks are very narrow on Upper State Street area. So again, with the hasn't hit a hearing yet, but the redevelopment of La Cumbre Plaza for the housing project, that is something that is in their conditions of approval, is to widen the sidewalk and the property frontage. But again, as properties redevelop, we'd be looking for that. And when the sidewalk widening happens, they're not winding towards the street because we still need the real estate. This is a very vehicle-driven street and very busy, and so we do not want to lose the functionality of the street from a vehicular standpoint and circulation. So the sidewalk widening would most likely be then happening from the private property, which is allowed when you're redeveloping. There's certain thresholds for, without getting into the weeds, that is a very standard process. So that is generally the concept from the Calle Real all the way to Las Positas. And I think regionally over time, and then just as we work with our regional partners, and you've seen, like, because eventually State Street turns into the Hollister, and so you kind of see through everybody's bicycle master plans or active transportation plans is really to have a whole network connecting Goleta to State Street. So this is where it is. Right now you have to bypass and go in, which is lovely. It's the Auburn Trail and then now we have the Modoc path, and that's one way to get into downtown. But there's a lot of people that live on the north side of State Street and the north side of the freeway. So to go all the way to get to the Auburn Trail is completely out of the way. So we do need to not ignore our mainline road systems for those connections. And then Upper State Street from Las Positas, then essentially down to Sola, which would be the sort of the terminus area for then the downtown master State Street plan. We're still under study for this. We have done a lot of improvements. There's some traffic signal modifications coming up with the Highway Safety Improvement Program project. We have talked to some of the residents in the vicinity. One person in particular was severely injured at one intersection, and we're still haven't landed on the secret sauce yet for that. We're still thinking through what it is. We do have a lot of comments that as far as when you think of State Street, that some people really like this section, but I think what's difficult and kind of with Chilpala, you have some different changes in topography, and it's really like the intersection treatments of how best to address that. So, so we definitely think there's going to be something. We just need to do a little bit more review for that.
Could we pause for a sec on
Yes.
Upper State Street questions if you're done with Upper State
Yes,
Street?
done with Upper State Street.
I think the census is like half of the mileage area. We can do separate questions on this. For the Las Positas State intersection, like becomes Las Positas to San Roque Road, there's a double left turn lane. Are we going to keep the two separate left turn lanes, or are we going to consolidate that into a single left turn lane?
Will remain a double left turn lane. The traffic volumes are quite high to go down to a single left turn lane there.
Interesting. Okay. And then the trees. So if we're getting rid of the median, are we getting rid of the trees that are some mature trees in the median, or are we going to work around those?
Good question. And point of clarification, the where we say the median needs to narrow is actually there's a 2-foot wide median beside left turn lanes that separates left turn lanes from the opposing lane of traffic. We need to steal a foot from that left turn lane. But when you steal a foot from a left turn lane, leaving a foot is not very much for a median. So we would look for some kind of alternate way of separating. That's where we need the foot. So where there's trees in the middle of the block, we just need to narrow those medians a little bit. We don't need to take out trees.
Okay.
But it's really where the left turn lanes are that the space is needed.
Okay, gotcha. Any other questions on Upper State? And then, all right,
And then
moving on.
to add, so those are the medians kind of in the upper, just north of Las Positas. As you get closer to the downtown area, those medians that are more beefy, those are also have historical significance. And there was with one of our safety projects, we were able to trim down the nose of one of those planters, but it's just another layer of analysis to understand when we're looking at intersection improvements. It would require like review from a historic structures report for that. All right, and then what we also we're hearing from the public and from the priority streets. So those were the priority streets that for engineering solutions, but there was also some comments. Well, wait a sec. What do you do? What happened to all these other areas like Cliff Drive? And it's hard in our because we're in final design on that, and we're like, well, no, it's designed, but it's not in the ground yet. So we still hear about, of course, all the issue areas from Milpas to Cliff and Modoc between Mission and Las Positas. So all of those, we want to make sure that those were in the plan and recognize that we are actively working and implementing those projects and that they're funded. So that's everything on the left-hand side. And then on the right-hand side, there's going to be projects that have been identified or be coming out of the effort. So this downtown State Street master plan, we envision there will be some project, and so stay tuned on that's coming Tuesday. And then, of course, where we have Shoreline Drive, and that's essentially, that turns into the waterfront adaptation plan that you just heard on the item before us. And then the Castillo's Street undercrossing, that you have heard lots about that as we've been in the planning effort and still trying to get grant funding. So we will return for May 12th at City Council asking for permission to submit a grant application again. And then the little blob is that Lower East Side pedestrian bike overcrossing, again, to not forget about that, because at the end of the day, Milpas and the Cabrillo interchanges are not going away. They're very much part of our circulation network, but we're still trying to find low stress routes from the east side to the waterfront to get to.
Is there any money yet for this one?
That's what we're going to return to City Council on May 12th to ask if we can submit another grant application. We scored really high the last round, so we think it could be competitive, so we'll see. And then the last slide with respect to infrastructure, the slide on your left is just additional street corridors that have been brought up from our prior last sort of round of outreach. So what we heard, for example, is, wait, you're designing Carial, you're designing Upper State Street, but what about the connection on La Cumbra? So I think that, as we get more monies to go in the design phase, that, we can't forget about La Cumbra. So we want to make sure we added that. Foothill route, again, that's where La Colina Junior High is, and just the whole Foothill to Cathedral Oaks, that's another really just regional issue. And we don't want to forget about that, and so that we still want to have that on the radar. Carrillo Street, we've made a lot of improvements there recently, but there's also just still continued comments to make that more of complete streets, and as we're seeing lots of redevelopment happening on Carrillo, so what does that look like? So to continue to monitor that. Milpa Street, we have the project coming. We're in final design, hoping to go into construction around this coming fall. But there's still the discussion out there about the bike lane for extending that. And so we have that mentioned. And then the image on your right-hand side is just some additional items, again, highlighting that there's high priority intersections that we want to take a look at, and that we have recommended intersections for curb extensions, so they might not necessarily be on the high entry network or just off, but intersections that have been flagged, and then some other opportunities for if we had to prioritize some sidewalk infill, those would be the areas. Yes.
As you were going through some of those, Carrillo and potential improvements there, I was actually wondering maybe what we've seen over the last week or two as the mural is being painted and Carrillo has gone down to one lane at the State Street intersection, how much congestion has cropped up?
Another good question. The congestion hasn't been significant, but it's deceiving because we've really cranked up the green time for Carrillo Street. And so there's pretty long waits now if you're on State Street on a bike or a pedestrian trying to cross Carrillo, just because we had to make up for that because there's 2 lanes instead of 1. So although drivers haven't experienced as much congestion, if we would have left the signal timing as is, there's been a lot more delay for active transportation users on State Street.
Yeah, it has been a challenge on a bike getting across that intersection.
So that's a temporary increase in the green time, or is it?
Temporary, yeah, and it'll go back to normal
Okay.
by the end of tomorrow, hopefully.
All right, good to know. I'm in that intersection daily, so I need to know that. All right.
And then there will be, associated with that particular intersection, we've done some pre-analysis, and then post-analysis will occur afterwards. And so that was the infrastructure. Then the last chapter is the progress and transparency. So again, we added a few more clarification items from the last comments. And the next steps. So the next steps again for the priority, the proposed like engineering approaches. We will have a webinar on that next Wednesday, and an in-person meeting at the library on the 6th. And then if, depending upon TCC's recommendation this evening, we would like to take the draft action plan for City Council for review on June 16th. And then debate, depending upon the comments that we receive on the approaches and then comments from council, we will have some level of report out on in June back at TCC. And it might, again, it just depends on how much we receive, whether it's just an announcement, we're continuing forward, there isn't too many changes from when we last saw it, or is, oh, we actually added this, this, and this, or a study came back on our signal type, whatever, that type of thing. And then we would like to return for City Council for final action of the plan on July 28th. So thank you for sticking with this. Is it's really exciting, but at this time, I think if there was maybe Chair Bob, you wanted to handle public comment first again, just because it's a long hearing.
All right. Yeah, let's move on to public comment first. Do we have in-person public comment? Is there? Are we missing something?
Check your phone.
Okay. Oh, okay. Got some signaling going here.
Oh, and the other question besides public comment, if you have any questions for Commander Payne that are related on any focused enforcement or questions, he would like to leave as well. He's had a very long day that started at 6 a.m.
Should we do that first then? All right. Does anybody have any questions for Commander Payne specifically? Yeah, go ahead.
I'm sorry if we talked about this last time. We may have. Back when we first moved here, it was a little over 10 years ago, you had a couple of kind of low-key enforcement actions on De La Vina to encourage people to stop for crosswalks. Crosswalks with people in them. That hasn't, I don't think it's happened for a long, long time. And it's getting pretty hard to cross De La Vina again. It's like you've got to walk in front of a car.
Okay. Yeah, we actually worked that with Derek and with Bedard, and you're right. To my knowledge, it's been a bit since we've done that again. I believe that was an OTS grant that we had at that point in time. So I will look into that and see if we can either rework some of our grant funding or find another source of funding to staff that and do that, because we were using, basically, we were videotaping the violations at the time. And so there's a whole timing element that Derek and Bedard worked through of like, hey, what's the proper distance? At what point in time would a reasonable stopping distance be allowed for a driver, for somebody stepping into the intersection? Because we do see a lot of those accidents where the pedestrian could be at fault because they step into the crosswalk with the assumption that they automatically have the right of way, which would be incorrect. So they do have to allow time for anybody operating a vehicle or a bicycle enough time to actually stop before getting into that intersection.
Sure. And
I can add to
by
that.
the way, I said De La Vina, but that's my street of interest. There are others, of course.
Yes.
So.
Yeah. If I could add to that too, the targeted enforcement activities that we participated with, a decade ago, the worst offenders for those crosswalks, we've improved a lot of them, most of them. So we're not The ones that we really focused on with the police department were the intersections where it was really challenging to cross. Think like Upper State Street at Mackenzie Park, some of the crosswalks along Close Village Road. There was some along De La Vina Street, particularly near Cottage Rehab, where it's now one lane. We've addressed a lot of them, and so I think that just goes to speak that we're trying to tackle these with engineering solutions so that we are able to help our police department use their resources as efficiently as possible. And there are upcoming improvements on De La Vina that'll make those crosswalks even better. So we're going to keep at it.
Derek, what's the formal name? I always say those pedestrian blinky things. That's my technical term.
Rectangular rapid flashing beacons,
Yes.
RRFB.
Those
that-
are that one up by Mackenzie Park on State Street is a godsend. I really think it's probably saved a lot of accidents, and on Cabrillo too. So those are the ones I think of when you.
All right, and we'll let these other folks get out of here. Public comment in person. Do we have any speakers?
Yes, we have 4 speakers signed up, so 2 in person, 2 online. First up is Barry Remis, and then next up will be Hannah Cohen, and then we'll go online after.
Okay, good evening again. Barry Remis with Move Santa Barbara County, and I'm going to, unfortunately I missed general public comment. I got here a little bit late, but there is an announcement I want to make. We'll get to this. I'll try to be brief so I can try to fit that in as well. Move Santa Barbara County was very pleased to be able to, as a stakeholder review, as Mrs. Grant mentioned, with reviewing the Safe Routes to School chapter and provided our input, multi-team input as well on various different levels to be able to bring it up to date. So we're pleased to be able to do that as well. So dig into that chapter when you get a chance. And as well as all of these. Did want to also thank, I was trying to breeze through as we look through the slides, looking at some of the more recent improvements. I noticed bicycle detection and mission and De La Vina, I forgot the intersection, but that was good to see there as well. We filled a lot of requests for that kind of thing, sensors in both in the street and also bicycle detection via video camera up in North County, and especially in Santa Maria. And we have some very strong advocates that help us with doing that. And Public Works in Santa Maria is hearing us hammering down on them a lot. So it's also good to see that continuing to happen here, so that our active transportation users, especially on bike or other wheels, can be detected so they can easily make turns, et cetera. And it's interesting, and it might be exciting to also see the advent, maybe with Milpas Corridor. I don't know if there's still the thought of introducing the first bike box in Santa Barbara, but we'll see where that goes. Also, Upper State Street too, and I don't know if this is beyond the mapping of it, but also keeping in mind, or lest we not forget about the really Upper State Street of going over the 101 for bicyclists can be treacherous, but I know it's tricky to be able to figure out how can we best lead people through that interchange or intersection as it gets over to the 154. But basically, obviously, Move endorses and supports and hopes that you'll find that the Safe Streets for All action plan has been comprehensively put together. And again, this is draft, and that we've also been happy to share out the upcoming community meetings as well as this meeting too, so that more input will be received before the next phases of it. Last thing I just want to mention, when it comes to safe streets, we've been eagerly awaiting and really happy that just off the press today, we are releasing our e-bike safety guide. And also safety brochure and a little bit of a buyer's guide as well. We've been promising this at different city councils. This is also an OTS, Office of Traffic Safety funded grant initiative with our partnership with the city of Santa Barbara. But these will be available. Unfortunately, I'm sorry I didn't bring enough for everybody here because I just got them, but you can pass them around. They'll be available at the Earth Day Festival, which also brings me the fact that we will be once again doing our world famous bike valet service. And despite the gloom and chilly potentially rainy weather this weekend, we encourage everybody to ride their bikes, don't drive, ditch the keys, and we'll park and watch your bikes for free. And these will be available at that and also our Move booth. And they'll be distributed, going out digitally. They're already available on our website, and they're going to be going to schools, and they will be also be handed off to e-bike retailers in the area. All right. Thank you very much.
Next up, we have Hannah Cohen. And then after, we'll follow online with Lily Hydrer, and then Tristan Miller.
Okay. Hello, committee, and thank you, staff, for the presentation. I'm really encouraged by everything that was shared tonight. This is really exciting to see a lot of the really dangerous areas being improved. And I'll just comment on a few of the different ideas. So for De La Vina, I definitely support the buffered, the pilot program of one lane. I used to live right off of there, and it was so dangerous with 2 different lanes of traffic, people parking and leaving those spaces constantly, and people weaving around. So having just one lane, I think, will really help simplify things. And also, it's kind of the equivalent to Chapala, so I think it could have a similar look there. And if you're doing a buffered bike lane already, maybe it could be protected by a lane of parking. And also for the Las Positas plan, I'm really happy about that. And just want to make sure that like all the intersections, especially around Modoc and Las Positas, are really narrowed in. It's just really dangerous to bike through there or even try to cross the street. And for Upper State Street, really happy with raised bike lanes, but I'm really concerned about there are so many driveways on Upper State Street, and biking along there, it's just like constantly cars coming out without seeing any bikers or seeing any people on the sidewalks either. So, I think a center bike lane could be a good option, right in the center of the street. I know that's not necessarily, I don't know, it hasn't been done in Santa Barbara, or at least I haven't seen it, but I think that could be good to avoid driveways. Otherwise, I think we need another solution for driveways on State Street. Also at State and De La Vina, I think De La Vina is really dangerous to bike on, but so like I would prefer to go past De La Vina and continue on State Street rather than turning onto De La Vina if I'm going downtown. But that feels really dangerous with the slip lane at De La Vina, so I think it would be a good idea to remove the slip lane. I also think that La Cumbre Road needs bike improvements, and Mission between Modoc and De La Vina is a high priority corridor for bikes. So, thank you.
Okay, so online we'll have Lily Hydrer. Okay, if you have permission to speak, please unmute and you can begin.
Hi all. Thank you so much for this presentation. I first want to say I am so incredibly encouraged. There's something about seeing all of these different kind of hotspots that I've personally experienced and that many other folks who bike and walk across town have also frequently experienced being addressed. That is just so validating, and so I'm feeling very heard and very grateful for all of the work already put into this. I wanted to briefly comment on traffic calming. I currently live on in this Upper State San Roque area, and I utilize the back roads kind of parallel to State Street to get downtown and back. And for the most part, it is much safer than Upper State Street. I am very much looking forward to any improvements on Upper State Street. But the back roads are still incredibly dangerous in a lot of ways. I actually got hit on San Remo because of a lack of daylighting, but also because of increasing speeds and drivers not being aware and driveways, just like a combination of factors. But I wanted to speak in favor of kind of removing the blanket statement of we don't do traffic calming that I've been told in the past when asking about any sort of traffic calming measures, whether that be speed tables or speed cushions or roundabouts or anything, especially in this kind of corridor through the Upper State Street area. I understand that it is a concern when it comes to like EMS response rates, but I think that blanket statement is really dangerous just in general. There needs to be some room for, okay, can we reevaluate this in certain areas that might not even be the fastest way for EMS to get to certain areas anyways, and really look at the data and how it would affect EMS response rates versus decreasing these kind of collisions or incidents in the first place, and maybe even decreasing the need for EMS in those areas. So just wanted to speak in favor for that and say thank you all again for your hard work. I'm really appreciative and really looking forward to following along with this whole project.
So
Thank
thank you. Thank you. Okay, so we'll move on to Tristan Miller. You have permission to speak. Please unmute and you can begin. Try one more time.
Hi, this is Tristan Miller. Can you hear me this time?
Yes. Thank you.
Perfect. Thank you so much, committee, for having us this evening. And thank you so much to Jessica Grant for this incredible presentation and all of the work you've done on this. Really excited to see most of these improvements come along in addressing some of the most dangerous streets in our city. I was extremely encouraged to see that La Cumbre Road was added to this plan since the last time. It was a big gap of how do you get across the freeway from the really great MODOC protected bike infrastructure. And I think that you adding it to the plan really helps with connecting the two halves of that area together. A lot of the other improvements are really fantastic, but I'll just go through the ones that I think are the most important. I think that Canon Perdido is going to be the biggest impact. Right now, if you look at the bike map that the city provides, it's technically like a yellow line, but yellow line doesn't really mean that there's actually a good way of biking there. And so connecting the main State Street Paseo to the actual bike infrastructure through those improvements will be really good for bicyclists. And then really happy to see you moving forward with De La Vina as a pilot project. Just making it look like the rest of the street that's already really good with the separated bike path. I would love to see it go to Sola, because Sola is now the main way of getting across town. And it's only a couple more blocks than where it's proposed to end. And so just having all of those little connections tightened together so that it all becomes one big continuous network. And then Las Positas, a two-way protected bike lane like on the rest of Las Positas on that mid part of Las Positas sounds incredible. I would love to see the same treatment done to Calle Real and then connect them two together. Don't know if that's possible, but worth trying, because Calle Real is probably one of the most dangerous feeling streets, and there's probably less crash data there because people just avoid it completely because it's so dangerous. And then lastly, love to see the upper state improvements being done. I think a raised bike lane is a good idea. I think it still makes sense to be on the edges, but maybe we can look at removing some of those curb cuts. Maybe there's just too many and some of them aren't necessary anymore. Um, really appreciate all your time on this. Really appreciate how in-depth it is, and glad to see it moving through, and we'll come support it at council when it gets there. Thank you.
Thank you to all of our public commenters. We're glad to see some engagement tonight. All right, so I think we can move on to questions from the committee. I understand and empathize that this is a very meaty item with lots of different components. So if you forget a question or you want to come back to something, we'll do that. And then, yeah, anyone want to start us off? All right, Vice Chair.
I think I just have one paired question. For the raised path, or regarding the raised path on Upper State, do you have a rough idea of how many of the bike accidents on State are from people being either like sideswiped by a car versus how much are cars turning into someone as they enter or exit a driveway, I think is my first part.
We would have to go tally that and split them out, but there are a lot of both. I'll just leave it with that.
All right. And then I guess similarly, if you were to do a raised separated bike path, would you make still what would be the driveway area that where a car would cross that path? Would that be sloped more like a driveway, or could you set it so that there was a little bit of like a hump for a car to go up that would maybe also slow them down?
Good question. We haven't worked out a lot of design details yet, but just conceptually, functionally, what we would be after is reducing vehicle turning speeds. So we would have to put some thought into the best driveway design to make that happen. Obviously, there'd need to be some kind of letting down of the curb height so that vehicles could make the turn, but I think controlling the vehicle speeds is what would make it safer. And so that's something we would figure out how to optimize.
Community Member Blackerby? Yeah.
Airport area. So it's in all the safety analysis, there's the little like, here's the airport, here's what happens there and everything. If you could go to the slide that had the, like, these are the other places we're looking at. It was one of your last slides. Yeah, additional considerations. So I feel like, and maybe there's just nothing to be done, but I have some ideas. The airport area, I just don't want that to get lost. So thinking about, and people, a lot of people don't even know it's your responsibility as the city of Santa Barbara. So I'd appreciate like another look at it at least before the finals, so that we know we don't forget about it, and we think about when Ms. Grant was talking about, State leads into Hollister and yada yada. Well, eventually Hollister is your problem too, right? So anyway, I just didn't want to get the airport to get lost, because there's some real bleak spots out there. So yeah, that was my only question, or I guess sort of a comment, but a question. If there are things you think were, just aren't reflected, or maybe I missed it.
Hollister is reflected in Goleta's bicycle master plan as far as being a future facility. The city, Santa Barbara, just recently completed a pavement maintenance project out there. So there are now buffered bike lanes on Hollister through the city section. So that's a big improvement. Now there's generous space between traffic. And so that's a really good facility now until what Goleta's envisioning.
Yes, I'm thinking more pedestrian type stuff,
Oh,
which is
yes.
pretty rough. So
Yeah,
and
there-
people waiting for the bus and stuff. You're just like in a dirt shoulder.
Yeah, and there are developments coming online that are continuing to fill in the gaps. And so that is,
What I understand from the bike plan is that eventually what would be mimicked is kind of when you're on Hollister near Elwood Elementary, where they have the multi-use path and sidewalk. That's, I think when I interpret too, and talking to the City of Goleta staff, it would be something, again, that would be continued for the stretch of Hollister,
Right.
so.
So just
but-
a mention of what, the portion that is city. Yeah.
Sorry, just to follow up, you're referring to the multi-use path that goes up Los Caneros and then disappears, or what are you?
Oh, the one that's just north of Pacific Oaks where the Albertsons is. So starting at that intersection is then essentially a multi-use path that goes all the way up to Elwood. But something, again, it's just for separating out users. I think in that case, it's more on one side just because of the land uses. But once you start to go, south, there's kind of equal land uses or destinations. So, but anyway, that's, how I understood it too, is eventually over time, is separating out road users.
Got it. And while we're on the subject, before I forget, so the redevelopment project I've heard of, it's just on the south side, right? Or is it also on the north side of Hollister in the airport area, like the Rivian dealership and that stuff? North side? Okay, gotcha. I wasn't sure. Okay.
Actually, Hillary, are you talking more about like on the James Fowler Road, like where the 11 bus stop is, and you kind of just have
Or
to?
like Los Carneros, like from Los Carneros, basically like that section is kind of bleak.
Agreed.
You know that. But let's reflect it. But I think connecting that, like, this is what Goleta's doing, I don't know. Nominal paragraph.
All right, further questions? Okay, I have like one or two. Where are they? That's the first question. Oh yeah, just on Upper State Street, like design considerations. I think I'm very intrigued by the possibilities of the raised bike lanes. I'm just curious if you could, briefly expand on your thinking of that intervention versus all the other ones we've heard of or thrown out there, like the center line one. I imagine the medians might make that a little challenging, but or maybe having it all on one side where there's fewer driveways. I don't know if there are on one side or the other. Just curious why we landed on this one as what we think is the best idea.
good question. So the, functionally, we see a few things on Upper State Street. One, the comment about all the driveways and curb cuts is real. And the majority of the driveways, if not all of them, are going to be sticking around until property is redeveloped. So that's something we are going to have to design around and just make it as good as possible. So that's going to be a limitation on how good State Street can be. So with that in mind, the foothill route, that parallel route that was also mentioned by one of the public commenters, is part of the strategy as well. It's going to be improving Upper State Street and making a parallel route for those who don't want to be on Upper State Street. So it's not something that was mentioned specifically in the Upper State Street plan because it's not on State Street, but that's part of the overall strategy is to improve both. That being said, sticking to Upper State Street as far as the configuration, with frequent side streets or driveways, it's always safer to have one way on each side of the street as opposed to a two-way. So that was a starting point. We hadn't thought of the center running. Probably don't have room. We'll look into that though. But just based on what we included in the plan and sticking with the bike movements, moving with traffic one way on each side of the street, And knowing that a lot of the collisions are side swipes or these right hook style collisions turning into driveways, you eliminate the side swipe style by providing some protection. And just given how narrow the street is out there, without blowing out all the trees, the best we can do is to put in raised bike lanes to provide that separation. And then for the right hook style collisions, it's going to be redesigning the driveways to try and slow turning movement. So that's really how we landed on that configuration, is kind of a combination of all those factors.
And anecdotally, again, yeah, we could analyze the center bike lane. I did have experience with it recently in Washington, D.C., where it's basically a connection point between the Capitol and the White House. And I think with this one is Upper State isn't necessarily something you would bypass either. There's a lot of destinations on both sides, so we have to think about people getting to their neighborhoods. So there would be a lot of diversion off of that center one versus I do see a value in that type of infrastructure, but it might not be the right fit or need. And so I think that's, again, why we landed on the sides, because, again, you're going to have conflicts. Where do you want the conflicts? So the person diverting from the center lane going directly in a vehicle travel lane to cross to get to a driveway, or where somebody's already sort of stopped at the driveway, a little bit slower moving vehicle. But, again, we can take a look at it.
Gotcha. And I'll also make a plug for Virginia Avenue in DC. It has the same treatment, and it's in more narrow, a little bit more, I think, contextually appropriate. Yeah, okay. That's good rationale. I guess, I would think that we could look at, like, folks would use the crosswalks, right? Like they do in Pennsylvania Avenue to cross on either side. But you do raise a good point. What if your destination is mid-block? They're very large blocks. People are going to shoot over. So with that in mind, I am curious about, are we worried at all about the areas where are there areas where we'd be getting rid of the median entirely, where people could freely, swerve into oncoming traffic? I'm just a little bit concerned about that, given people's tolerance for illegal left turns in this town.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We haven't dug into the details yet.
Okay.
If there would be any constraints where it's a project killer. So if there's a pinch point somewhere along the corridor that we just cannot get a continuous bike facility through without removing a median, we haven't identified any of those yet. So it's our preference to maintain all the left turn access control that's currently in place, but it needs to be studied in more detail.
Mm-hmm. Would we be allowed to use like pylons if we need to?
Like flexible delineators. Yeah. Yes, they're.
I'd rather do that than kill the bike
yeah,
lanes. Is where I'm going.
They
doesn't look pretty.
Aren't Santa Barbara style infrastructure.
I mean, Upper State isn't really.
Yeah, but is it within the realm of possibilities? Yes.
Okay. If it's a project killer, I think I'd rather do that than not. Okay. And then last question, one really quick question. The intersection of Calle Laurels, where the CVS is, I saw there's a new traffic signal icon. Is there going to be a left turn signal as part of that? Because I run into that a lot. People get really backed up. Yeah, a protected left turn. And people really back up, and then they do these crazy, like, last second, I'm just going to swerve into the right lane and almost hit someone. So or other cars, yeah.
The traffic signal icon was due to some recent changes that were made at that intersection. Mm-hmm. So there's now more lighting, leading pedestrian intervals for crossing State Street. We're not planning to add any left turn phasing. There is an increased amount of westbound left turns from State Street, westbound State to southbound Calle Laurels, just due to the Upper De La Vina Bridge project right now.
Okay, that's fair.
Once that project is complete, traffic patterns should go back to normal. The reason we cannot put a temporary left turn signal in right now, just for the duration of the project, is the traffic signal mast arm isn't long enough or structurally able to hold the indications that would be needed for a left turn arrow.
Okay. Got it. Yeah, and the detour is a good point. And I think if there are any concerns that it's going to be an ongoing issue, just it's worth looking at because it's getting pretty bad over there. Okay, and last question is about the endemic road diet question. I haven't looked at the volumes on Upper State. I know they're high compared to most of the town, but would there, and I can get into this with comments about like why I care about the right of way for other things being expanded, but is there any wiggle room, or are we way past the standards on, even if it's just like how Las Positas has 2 northbound and 1 southbound, or it might be the other way around, any part of Upper State that we could look at doing things like that, or getting rid of the second left turn lane into Las Positas, stuff like that?
It really comes down to a community tolerance for congestion. And in that part of the city, people rely on their vehicles more than downtown areas. So just my hunch is the community's tolerance for congestion in that part of the city wouldn't tolerate going down to 1 lane in each direction on State. But the thing to also remember is when you go down to 1 lane, everybody that's not on wheels is using that lane. So transit, emergency vehicles. So as far as like how do we accommodate growth in that area of the city, just given that it is a little bit further away, there is limited infrastructure for active transportation. Transit is going to play a really important role in how do we accommodate that growth. So I think that's a really important consideration too, is, if we're talking about reducing vehicle lanes, is the best use of that space for bikes, or would it be better for transit?
Or both, maybe.
So I think the overall concern up there would be congestion, but if there is a community desire to broach that subject, I think it wouldn't be a slam dunk that it should be for bikes.
Yeah, no, I hear you. I guess the question is how much congestion is congestion, right? Like, and how much is congestion worth versus the other many public realm opportunities there. But I'll leave it there. All right. Any other questions before comments? All right, let's get into our comments and ideas for recommendation. Does anyone want to start? Committee member Smith?
I've got a few. First, and it's just a real minor thing in chapter 4. You sometimes talk about motorcycles / mopeds, and then motorcycles / scooters, and then I'm not sure if e-bikes are counted as mopeds or they're just bikes. So I'm not really asking a question, I'm just saying maybe clean it up a little. Just, I think probably they're all, you just mean motorcycles, and, well, anyway. Let's see. So, yeah, I didn't realize we were going to comment on each street when we were on the street. Going back to Bath, I think everything you're doing is fine. I guess overall, I want to say, I also think you did a great job. Thank you very much. You folks do great work, and I'm very happy with it. On Bath, I use that a lot, and it's like there are just a lot of driveways, a lot of people who don't know where they're going. It kind of has the Gelson's parking lot effect, where cars are just kind of randomly stopping, starting. Sometimes cars come in kind of fast from below Mission, but in general, cars aren't going real fast. It's like that's not the problem. It's just, it's all the parked cars, so cars coming out of driveways can't see. It's just a lot of moving objects in different directions, and seems like a really hard one to fix without getting rid of some of the cars. So I wish you luck. It's a tough one. One thing which it doesn't exactly relate to the document, I mentioned this to Jessica in an email, but just kind of a reminder that if you put people on bikes, they're going to crash. I mean, I remember being mystified about bike crashes on Castillo below Mission. That came up in a meeting. And it's like, that's a really nice bike path. And I feel really good going down that, but it is kind of downhill, so you might be going a little fast. So what's going on? Anyway, about a little over a month ago, I was riding down State, coming up on Sola Street with, I was just doing errands. I was not in my John Forrester spandex-clad mode. And I was just cruising along, and the last thing I remember is I was going to take my water bottle out of the water bottle holder. And I don't know if that somehow caused the crash, if it like stuck and then I smashed my hand into the handlebar. But I like vaguely came to in the ambulance. Ended up spending the night in the ICU for observation. It wasn't really, you said, oh, it was scary. It wasn't really scary because it was like, by the time I was conscious, they were telling me, looks like it's stable, you know, and it's like, it was just a concussion, and I was fine. I am fine. But it's like, I'm a really experienced cyclist. I've done a lot of riding in, you know, a loaded mountain bike hundreds of miles in the mountains. I don't like crash all the time. But, you know, it's like when you're on a bike, you have no protection. And it's like, sometimes things are just going to happen. I mean, maybe a bird hit me in the eye. I don't know. It's just, yeah, it landed right on my memory processing center, which, so my memory of that period of time is pretty shaky. Yeah, don't anybody worry about it. It wasn't that painful. I'm fine, no problem. But yeah, just you put people on two wheels, they're going to crash. Never mind the one wheels. One thing that's come up, and so this isn't a comment for you folks, it's more a comment for a comment about comments. You were advocating the bike lanes that are to the right of parked cars. Yeah. And if I'm in John Forrester spandex mode, I would hate that. You're right next to a bunch of fixed objects, like lampposts. You're going to have less room, as Derek was saying. If I'm going 5 or 10 miles an hour in certain situations, it might be a good idea. But I think as a generic solution, I'm not liking it. So just my vote. Was there anything else? So anyway, yeah, in general, it's all really good, and I'm leaving happy. So it's
Further comments? Vice Chair? Yeah, go ahead.
I think just briefly, yeah, I think, thank you. I know this has been a long time coming and lots of parts. It's great to see it all coming together into one cohesive document. De La Vina, I think, is great. I think when I first moved to Santa Barbara, I lived on De La Vina, and I don't live there anymore, but I've seen it over the years get more and more one lane, more and more bike lane spots, and it's just overall become a much less stressful as a pedestrian, as a cyclist, much less noisy and loud and unpleasant, and I think just continuing that work is great. I'm really happy to see something being done on Upper State. I think, when you first mentioned Upper State, you could all of us kind of like inhaled a little bit, because I know this has been a hard thing for a long time. Happy to see that. I know there's kind of I can see how a raised path is probably the best option, and I'm really happy to try it. I think, and this is sort of a, just side note, because I know on Bath, one of the things that was mentioned was it is fully, at full capacity for cars parked on the street, and I would agree with that. I used to live in that neighborhood, and I would actually suggest, because I think there's some housing projects that are going in that area, the Shot Center parking lot is always empty. And I would love to see some kind of deal with the city or with like neighbors in the area able to buy a permit to park in that lot, because there's never more than 10 cars in there, and it is massive. It also has a lot of potholes, and if that helped them repave it, then like everyone would love that. So that's my suggestion that would maybe improve parking in that area. So, thanks.
All right. Committee Member Buckerby.
Great job. It's great to see this comprehensive, having gone through the last bike plan update and seeing what's been, implemented since then, to see, looking at all modes, looking at this, and I can tell it's more sophisticated in the sense of like, okay, we know that we need this to go after grants, and we need to set ourselves up for what comes next. And so I think you've done that really well. I have a couple of minor little clarifying line edits and graphic things, which I will give you after. But yeah, I just want to say great job. I think you've nailed it, and I appreciate the public input that helped get us to this place as well. So I'm excited to be at this point.
All right. Further comments? All right. I will make mine as brief as I can. Just going to rattle them off for the sake of time. Real quick first of all, yes, great work. Thank you. This is really such a comprehensive thing, and it's hard to wrap our heads around, with all of the different pieces of it, but I think, it's gotten to a really good place overall. And, I'm excited to see how it continues to move through the process. On Chapter 1, the leadership and goal setting, thank you for incorporating the comments. It's very clear you took our comments seriously from prior meetings and incorporated them here. So thank you for the clarifications on the complete street language. There was just one kind of, I don't know if you want to call it an inconsistency or just like something that might need to be further clarified. Trying to find it in here. So it says, so that we shall incorporate complete street design elements, including in maintenance, but then it says like an exception if it's only maintenance. So that might need to be spelled out a little bit more. What is maintenance also? Is a full resurfacing, repaving project maintenance? Because if that's maintenance, I think that triggers, in my opinion, the shall incorporate complete streets stuff. I think the other stuff is good. I'm a little nervous about how open-ended some of them are. So if it's possible to further define like ease of or access considerations, like we have laws and codes, right, that are hard triggers. So if that's what it means, that's great. But if it's kind of just like whoever's working that plan check that day's opinion, that's a little bit where I get a little more nervous about it. Because my point is I want to see complete streets applied everywhere it's physically and legally and fiscally possible. End of story. No surprise there. And then, so my comments are only for the rest of them just on Chapter 9, like most of what we've been talking about so far. I'm just going to run through these. So thank you for including the additional streets. I think it's a little if I was looking at this from the first time, it feels a little odd where with how Bath Street and like Olive Street are, and maybe Nopal Street, and like kind of the scale of interventions compared to like Upper State Street. I don't know if there's a way we can kind of like truncate that so that I don't have like cut sheets or are just kind of like included somewhere as like we're also going to add like lighting and crosswalk improvements on these streets, but like it doesn't feel like a full revisioning. And I understand, you know, you made good cases for why on most of them. But like, yeah, like things like Las Positas and De La Vina and like are going to be a lot more big ticket items. So I think emphasizing those on like with all the design elements is a little more important. And then, so Bath Street, you know, I definitely hear it. I think the thing is that street parking is really important, but it's not an overriding consideration over safety, in my opinion, with the Complete Streets framework. So I don't think it needs to be Bath Street, but there should, you know, I don't know if we can look at other ways to make it easier to travel around that Cottage Hospital area and from Mission is, yeah, just a little rough over there. Thank you for including La Cumbra, Canon Perdido. I think the Presidio side, like at least from like State Street up to Santa Barbara Street, you could get rid of all of the street parking on the Presidio Libero side. There basically are like 5 spaces that are legal. And so if that's what it takes to get in some better infrastructure there, and then once you get down the hill, down past Santa Barbara Street, it becomes like a, you know, more typical situation. Like that's fine. I just think I wouldn't rule it out. I think preserving the parklets and the biking stuff on the handlebar side is a little bit like where I want to preserve what's currently existing. And then I'll skip down to Las Positas. Love what you're planning for. I just think with all these new traffic signals, let's try and if we can do signal coordinating, because I could see if anything, you know, folks in that get used to that nice, clean, quick up the hill drive. So don't want to ruffle too many feathers with too many new stopping things. But I think it's great that they're being included to increase the pedestrian access across the street. Yeah, please talk to Caltrans about trying to incorporate as much of the Complete Streets crossover to MODOC as possible. They do have legal mandates now for Complete Streets elements, so feel free to remind them of that. And just this is a bit of a crackpot thing, but I would love a roundabout in the Las Positas MODOC intersection. It's just so massive. I can't imagine it wouldn't fit. I understand it's capital intensive, but like that, like talk about DC, you could do a Logan Circle style thing in there, right? That would be a dream. But I think we absolutely need to get rid of that slip lane up from MODOC up the hill to Las Positas. I have seen like 3 accidents just happenstance in the past year there, and I know the folks who own that house or that clinic or whatever it is. Yeah, but they are very concerned about someone, again, and it's happened before, flying off into their building, and I could see it happening. And I think we could get rid of that slip lane and people can just do rights on red normally. And then Upper State, I'll finish there. I think you kind of convinced me on the raised bike lanes is the best option. Definitely study as much as you can the other things folks mentioned, but at the end of the day, safety is the main thing. And so if that's the best option, let's do it. I feel like there's a little bit more of a capacity to be a little bit more ambitious with the right of way, and I just, because of the Upper State Street, I would like to see. It's hard to imagine that materializing quickly when we rely on private redevelopment exclusively for the public realm improvements, because I mean it's already in all these upzoning things, and we're not seeing a ton of projects outside of La Cumbra anyway. So I don't see that happening like in our lifetimes, honestly, if that's what we're waiting on. And I think it would ideally be a corridor where folks they have the outdoor dining, they have a nice walking 2-way pedestrian thing, ADA compliant, and a nice bike facility, and enough, you know, traffic circulation. But yeah, I think that's it for me. Thank you so much for all of the incorporation comments. Real quick, I think thank you for including La Cumbra, Creo, Mission in there. I think the way it was written was a little expansive on some of them. I feel like it's more of like really particular parts that people are concerned about. Like, so for Creo, it's not like the whole street. It's more of like from under the freeway to State Street, and La Cumbra is really like from Via Senda to like La Colina.
We did hear from the upper
did?
part too,
Okay.
Stealth.
Didn't we just do a project there?
Oh, we did, but it's adding the sidewalk on the other side.
Okay, I see. I mean, that's fair. But yeah, I think that's the key thing is like those freeway issues. And then I appreciate the Foothill Road thing, but I mean, it is a Caltrans facility, so I don't know if it needs to, if it's not in the HIN, I don't know if it really needs to be put at that level, but because we can't really do anything unilaterally, right? So I don't know, but just throwing that out there. Anyway, that's it for me, other than the usual thing of let's try and find funding that isn't from other jurisdictions exclusively for all of these. And that's it. All right. Any other comments?
Yeah, Chair, we are looking for a motion. And again, there is a caveat that we're still doing outreach over the next couple of weeks, so there might be updates to the plan with that respect. But I'll leave it back to you, Chair,
All right,
to facilitate a motion.
Looks like you're ready to make a motion.
I'll make a motion. It's right here, it's very good, concise. The recommendation is that this committee recommend forwarding the draft Safe Street for All action plan to the city council for further review, because we've done a lot of review already here, and subsequent adoption.
I'll second that.
All right. We have a motion and a second on the floor. All those, well, is there any discussion on the motion? All right. We're ready to go. All right. All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, say no. Abstentions. All right.
Thank you for hanging in here for
Yeah.
tonight. I'll leave it to the chair to close the meeting, but I did want to mention two important things. One, NAMI, who's always quietly behind us, but she is behind a lot of the creative design of the plan, and I just wanted to highlight it because we wrote the content, but she really made it look beautiful, and we're so thankful for her for that. She's very creative. And then no relation to me, but Haley Grant did a lot of our GIS work, so I want to make sure that she's mentioned as well.
That's great. All right. Well, thank you all for your participation and hanging in there. Yeah, thank you all so much, and thank you for having food for us this time. I think that's very much appreciated. And at 9:07, I will adjourn the meeting. Thank you all.